This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Bonjour, everyone. That's my French. It's as close as I'm going to get. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Mademoiselle Mateo with us, as well as Michael Barr. We say good morning. Yes, we're going to start with international relations this morning. Tina Fordham will be with us. We're thrilled to go to Francine Lacroix. I think in her contract it says she can only appear with the Eiffel Tower in the background.
Background, of course.
I think that's the way it is.
Well, that's exactly how we want her.
Busy week. I mean, the heat there. Stay cool out there. Serious heat. We'll talk about that and all. But Paul, the heat in the markets as well, it's deceptive. It's sort of like a churning morning. And the key thing for me with Brian Belski coming up later is what about earnings starting Wednesday, Thursday into JP Morgan?
I can't believe we're back into earnings season here. But yes, we've got earnings time. You're absolutely right. We've got the big banks coming up, and you always like to hear what Jamie Dimon has to say. We also got some inflation data coming up on Thursday, which will be front and center for this Federal Reserve with CPI data. We're
going to coalesce in for you all of the politics and the international relations, maybe a little less United Kingdom today, a little more Paris and the Le Pen victory down by Marseille.
All I know is the political polling around the world is equally terrible. We went into this weekend thinking that the far right was going to have a big showing. Not so much.
And the power of democracy, really, actually humbling. We'll get into some of the history of this and where we are and what it means for you as well. We say good morning on YouTube. I came up again this weekend. You go into Google, you search YouTube Bloomberg Podcast, so that'll get you right there to subscribe and to search for our YouTube effort. It's out there right now worldwide, including Francine Lacroix in Paris. There's Apple CarPlay, Android Auto as well. From the Interactive Broker Studios of the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Well, futures right now in the red, and this is after last week's rally on Wall Street. Inflation figures, comments from Fed Chair Jay Powell, bank earnings, all in the focus this week. Right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 13 points, Dow futures down 5, S&P futures down 2. We head to the bond market. The 2-year yield, 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. European stocks edging higher after France's snap election. We have the CAC in Paris right now, up just 1% right now. The DAX, stock 600 in Germany is up about 0.2%. We have shares of Paramount. They're higher, up about 3%. It agreed to merge with Skydance, handing control to producer David Ellison. And then Boeing, it's agreed to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy connection with those 2 fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jetliner. The company actually faces a criminal fine of as much as $487.2 million. Boeing shares up about 0.5%. And Microsoft, they told employees in China to use iPhones for work from September, cutting off Android devices. Those shares up about 0.1%.
Wow.
That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. I saw Lisa's newspaper. One of her interns sent out the newspaper segment. It's really interesting.
Okay. That's coming up 7:48.
To see. This is a joy. As many of you know, for years I had the privilege daily of working with Francine Lacroix. She has a continental sense based in London of anyone. And when you're divided in the French polity, you get Francine Lacroix on a roof between the 8th and the 16th arrondissement.
Oh, boy.
Joining us now from Paris, Francine Lacroix. Francine, let me start with the to-do list. What does Mr. Macron do this morning? Who does he meet with? Who does he telephone?
Well, we haven't seen him for 10 days, so it'd be good actually if the press caught a glimpse of the president. I am sure that the first person he spoke to was probably his wife, who we know all matters of state is right beside him to see what the next move is. We also know that his prime minister, the very young but very capable Gabriel Attal, who yesterday resigned because his party and Macron's party wasn't number one, has been asked by the president himself to stay on as caretaker until a new government is formed. Now, Tom, this is something that France is not really used to. It's a bit of a political mess because, very broadly speaking, you have 3 factions, the center, the right, and the left, and they have broadly the same number of parliamentarians. So no one can govern alone, and so they need to find a way forward.
What's interesting to me, Francine, I was on the phone with Lila Laurent about an hour ago, is why can't Mr. Macron merge or come to an agreement with Mr. Sarkozy's newer party, Les Républicains, and have some kind of stronger center ground? Are the conservatives so far apart they can't talk to the fancy guy in the palace?
Well, part of it is that. Part of it is numbers. Even if there was an alliance between Emmanuel Macron's party and the Républicains, they wouldn't have enough votes actually for a majority. But also the Républicains a couple of weeks ago decided to get closer to Marine Le Pen's party. So this is the concern, Tom, that actually France is becoming a lot more like Italy or even Germany in needing this broad coalition. So you're looking at numbers, but remember they signed agreements. I mean, they physically signed agreements. The left signed an agreement. It's basically 5 parties bundled into one, and the right with the far right did the same. So you have to first of all unpick those alliances and then try and remerge. And frankly, it's no simple task. I mean, they all came with a list of things that they wanted to do. They all came with the thing of, things that they promised to the voters. And if you redraw those maps, they won't be able to deliver.
Francine, what happened to Marine Le Pen? She was front and center as of just a couple of days ago. Now what?
Well, so first of all, she didn't do too badly. So her party came third, but actually she has about 35 to 36% of the popular vote. Remember, what happened is if you speak to most French, if you say the word Marine Le Pen or, her party, they think of her dad, they think of all the anti-immigration, basically throwing away the rule book away, and many still view them as a very racist party. And so there was a block. Despite her efforts to say that she's just right and more center-right, there was a block from the other parties where basically when people went to vote, they no longer had the option to vote for 4 candidates. They only had 2. It was either Marine Le Pen or someone else. So that was a way of shoring up the votes and getting them away from her for parties that were more in the middle. Now that means 2 things. That Marine Le Pen has said, look, she was kind of cheated of the election. It's of course the electoral system, but she feels it wasn't fair. And so you could also, secondly, see a lot of people taking to the streets saying, well, I wanted to be heard. I gave my popular vote to Marine Le Pen. And it doesn't look like she'll play a role in this new government. But it could also embolden her, not only for the presidency, but she still has a big bloc in parliament that could influence policy.
So, Francine, what do you think the French people want from their government over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, we know what they don't want, which is more chaos. We know that there has been a lot of concern about the retirement age. I was asked this morning whether France is reformable. Now, remember, again, Emmanuel Macron tried to reform the country through labor policies, through shaking some of the business sentiment. I think it's unfair to say that France doesn't want to be reformed, but they just want to, live a better life, certainly better than the next generation. And because of the cost of living crisis, that hasn't happened.
Francine, I want to get this in, and I think it's important without turning it into a history lesson. They had to haul Charles de Gaulle out of retirement to save the nation as they moved from the Fourth Republic to the Fifth Republic. Are they in any constitutional risk here, where people are whispering in the coming weeks and months with this gridlock of a Sixth Republic?
I think there's a danger if this goes on for too long, but no one's talking about that yet. There's, I guess, an assumption, Tom, which I think could be erroneous, but there is an assumption that the left, because the left is not, again, because it's so many parties and the far left doesn't really sit comfortably with the rest of the left, that they break away, that is the party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and form some kind of alliance with the center, possibly with Macron's party. So that's the base case for the moment. It could take months.
20 seconds, Francine. Somebody on YouTube live chat emails in, would Francine swim in the River Seine now as we go to the Olympics? Would you swim in the damn river, Francine?
No, not if you paid me $1 million.
Or francs. Francine Lacroix, thank you so much. Tough gig, Avenue Marceau with the Tour Eiffel in the background. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. A mixed bag of news for President Joe Biden as he starts the week. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
As the president campaigned in Pennsylvania,
the next 120 some days or so, they're going to get a real good look at who Donald Trump is.
but several influential congressional Democrats say privately they want him to step aside. The latest defectors include several Democratic leaders of House committees. Separately, a new Bloomberg Morning Consult poll shows Biden has closed the Trump lead to 2 points in swing states. And Senate candidate Adam Schiff says given the president's incredible record, he should take a beat.
Joe Biden is running against a criminal. It should not be even close, and there's only one reason it is close, and that's the president's age.
Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
France looks to be heading toward a political instability surface after a surprise win by a left-wing coalition in Sunday's legislative election. It offered no party a path to claim the majority needed to govern. The new Popular Front won 178 seats in the National Assembly, according to data compiled by the Interior Ministry. Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, which pollsters last week had seen winning the election, came in third with 143, while President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance notched up 156. Beryl is once again a hurricane as it made landfall in southern Texas. Matagorda County Public Information Officer Mitch Thames.
The winds are really, really strong right now. We're in the eye right now. We understand we're ready. We're bracing for the back half of that hurricane.
Matagorda County Public Information Officer Mitch Thames. The storm had weakened after leaving a path of deadly destruction through parts of Mexico and the Caribbean. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom Pauly.
I should do something on markets now. I mean, we're doing economics, finance, investment. Forget about it. Doug down in Florida, he had a bad weekend, and it wasn't the heat. What happened to the Yankees? I'm walking around talking to Michael Barr about it's the 1927 Yankees. Michael Barr, what happened?
The only good thing for you is that they lost to Boston.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the only good thing about this. If you're a Yankees fan, I know you've got to be saying, oh, I'm sorry, Lisa, I forgot. You got to be saying, what in the Sam Hill is going on, man?
You know, Anthony Volpe, this is the Associated Press, excuse me, brutal. We play to win, and we expect to win.
Exactly.
That sounds just like, that's why we hate the Yankees.
That's a Yankee fan, born and bred from New Jersey. Del Barton High School, Anthony Volpe. Yeah, big losing streak here. I mean, they just can't get out of their way here. They're just limping towards the All-Star break here. But they were the hottest team in baseball the first couple months, and now they can't buy a win. So let's get to the All-Star break. Take a little break. We'll come back.
Barr doesn't know what he's talking about. Sweeney doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. We go to our Yankees expert, Lisa Mateo. Lisa, what in God's name happened?
I don't know, but the only good thing that came out of this was the guy they brought up. What is his name? Rice Ari. You got to help me with it, right?
Yeah. Really good.
Yes, hit 3 home runs in one game. I mean, so that was a little spark, but it didn't really do much.
They got swept by the Cincinnati Reds. This is not the big red machine from the 70s, Tom.
No, they're struggling. Yeah. I know. Thank you, Lisa, for that. You were more of a value add than Bart.
Exactly.
It's been in the last month. Looked at the All-Star. You know the Detroit Tigers have members on the All-Star team?
Do they really?
Yeah.
We do?
There's your baseball for the weekend. I saw somebody, I'll say it was in Washington, fans in this heat, you're going out to the ball game. People looked wiped out of the stands from the heat. Red and green on the screen. The VIX a little elevated, 12.67. 10-year real yield, 2.02%.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost, global trading, and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges and no conflicts of your interest at ibkr.com/RIA. All right, we have a busy week on the economic calendar. Tomorrow, Fed Chair Jay Powell delivers the Fed's semi-annual testimony to the Senate Banking Committee, and then he appears before the House Financial Services Committee Wednesday. Thursday, you got to look at the Consumer Price Index for June and initial jobless claims for last week. And then Friday, we're on to the Producer Price Index. Also a big week, bank earnings from the likes of JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. Ahead of all this, we have futures, a little bit of red and green on the screen. NASDAQ futures down about half a point. Dow futures up 15. S&P futures, they are little changed. We have the 2-year yield, 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. And that's up about 2 basis points. Commodities, oil edging lower after 4 straight weekly gains. Right now, Brent crude $85 a barrel, WTI crude $82 a barrel. We have spot gold lower at $2,373 an ounce. Some deal-making news. We have Eli Lilly agreed to buy biopharmaceutical company Morphic Holding for $57 per share in cash. You have Eli Lilly, their shares little change. Morphic Holding up more than 75%. And Danish brewer Carlsberg looking to expand its presence beyond just beer. It's buying UK Pepsi bottler Britvic for $4.2 billion. Carlsberg up more than 4% in Germany, and Britvic up more than 4% in London. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We're going to get to the markets. Paul, you mentioned Michelle Meyer will be with us with MasterCard on the consumer. Yes. I agree. That's going to be
in studio.
Really timely. Lori Calvasina with an update. Brian Belski in the 9 o'clock hour. We're going to get to the markets, but with the politics of the weekend, and there's just no one that can help us better on the broad vision of what in God's name is going on in the heat. I mean, first of all, Tina, let's cut to the chase. Emma Raducanu, she tells Andy Murray she won't play doubles. Then she goes out and loses at Wimbledon. I mean, it was saved for the United Kingdom by Sir Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix. How did Britain get through the weekend?
Well, don't forget the European Football Championships.
Oh boy, that's right.
Yeah,
the UK won there as well. No, it's a good mood in London, dare I say, despite the fact that it did pour all weekend. We had elections where nobody objected, and everybody politely handed over, and the moving van has already come and taken Rishi Sunak's stuff. So that was very civilized.
Paul he had an umbrella and a drink on his deck here. It's like 102 degrees here, Tina. And he said, get Tina Fordham. And he did so because the arch question in America Drive Time this morning is, what is the United Kingdom election? What does the French election mean for the first Tuesday of November in America? What do we take away?
It's $1 million question, or maybe more. Analysts are like traders. We like to spot patterns, but it isn't very obvious what the implications might be for the U.S., except that surprises happen in democracies. In France, a surprise really happened. I mean, even though we observed how this very unusual to the American political mind, this collaboration between different parties, where candidates would drop out of races that were calculated so that the end goal of keeping out the far right would be achieved. Even then, the polls on Friday in France did not put this new left coalition in first place, and we went into the weekend still thinking that the front, I can't remember what they're called now.
That's okay, I can't either.
FN would be, the far right party would be the largest in parliament. We all were told that. Every poll Friday confirmed it. And that didn't happen. They ended up third. So first takeaway is your regular public service reminder, without slacking off pollsters, that polls are imperfect people change their minds, and human behavior is incredibly difficult to model. So that is something we should take away into the US elections when we still have such narrow margins within the margin for error. So that's point one. Surprises and polling errors are with us.
Tina, given the elections both in the UK and in France, what does it mean for the UK and the European Union in terms of their relationship? Can they be closer together, or is Brexit still, I guess, kind of the issue for the two entities?
Well, Brexit was the word that dare not speak its name during the campaign. Keir Starmer, now the Prime Minister, did not actively campaign on reversing Brexit or anything like it. In fact, he said the day before Britain went to the polls that he didn't foresee that the UK would return to being a member of the European Union in his lifetime, thereby crushing the hopes of many, given just what a negative impact it's had on the UK economy and everything else. But in the first hours and days of the Starmer government taking over, we've seen some very positive noises about strengthening ties, about a defense pact. New Foreign Minister David Lammy went to Germany first. That was a clear signal, followed by Poland and Sweden, also very much with the NATO summit in mind. So the energy that this new British government is projecting is very much about strengthening the UK's relationship with its allies in the EU and in the United States.
So in the UK right now, what is the to-do list for this new government? Is it simply to project stability, or are there certainly some things they want to get done here?
Well, as is usually the case, of course, in national elections, the focus was very domestic. It's the first UK election that I can recall in my 22 years of being here where housing reform, reform to the planning process, was front and center, and also the UK's crumbling public services. These are in the top 5 concerns from British voters. So the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, the equivalent of Treasury Secretary Rachel Reeves, is talking a lot about delivering growth. But interestingly, for US political observers, one of the lessons that the Starmer team took away from Obamacare and from Biden's industrial policies was the observation that they, delivered positive results, but didn't get much credit from voters for it. So they've come out against what they call deliverism, which I think is going to be interesting to watch.
One final question. Do you trust the polls in the United States of America?
I mean, trust sounds like it's something almost.
Are they useful? Are they
emotional.
useful?
They are. Any pollster will tell you a poll is a snapshot, not a prediction. Everybody seems to forget this. It's a snapshot of where public opinion is today. Do I trust the polls? I certainly use them as the only available quantitative measure, and I think that most people's gut instincts are terrible when it comes to reading the public mood. But the same with prediction markets, Tom. They are always wrong, and yet they're cited in every single sell-side research report. We're going to need to marshal as much data as we can, but I think we need to put it in historical context, and we need to think outside of the box when it comes to this U.S. election, because the playbook is going out the door.
Tina, thank you. Tina Fordham, just excellent. Can't say enough about her. Fordham Global Foresight with Citigroup for years as well. Paul, when was the last time we opened a Monday with 30 minutes of politics?
Exactly.
I can't remember.
European politics.
I mean, we got some Yankees talk in there.
We did.
Can we do the markets at 7:32?
Yeah, let's try to do that coming up here.
Paramount, come on, Paul, 20 seconds, done.
It's done.
Signed.
Sherry Redstone is out. And now I have no idea what the direction.
Are they really going to get this done? Come on, Lucas Shaw's
I think the deal's going to be done. It's not a big capital situation here, so it's relatively small amounts of money changing hands here. So this deal will get done, and the question is, can this new management team do anything with these assets?
That's the difference, Lisa. You and I are looking at $128 from one of our kids like is more money than God. Sweeney's looking at billions of dollars at Paramount. It's not a lot of money. Stay with us. JP Morgan earnings on Friday from New York. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures this morning. NASDAQ futures down about half a point right now. Dow futures up 25 points. We have S&P futures up about half a point. We have the two-year yield, 4.62%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 2 basis points. European stocks edging higher. Traders weighing the unexpected French election result. Right now, we have the CAC in Paris up about 0.2%. The stocks 600 right now up about 0.4%. Companies making news. We'll start with Samsung. Thousands of workers kicking off a 3-day strike to demand better pay. And then over at Burberry, reportedly planning to cut hundreds of jobs following that sharp drop in its stock market value. That's according to the Telegraph. Their ADR is up about 2%. And finally, the Apple Watch getting an upgrade. It's approaching its 10th birthday, so it has to do a few changes. Bloomberg reporting this fall the company is going to change some models, larger displays, a thinner new look, and a new chip. Apple shares up about 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Did a scientific survey this morning. I'm kidding. Just reading in on the shock of what's going on in Europe. And Paul, I'm going to suggest markets really haven't moved all that much. As you greet the morning in a heat wave America, Euro, I just thought would be weaker, and it's sort of not. 108.28. Euro sterling, Francine Lacroix would say, is more important. Yes, strong sterling, weaker euro, ever fractional. I'm looking at Louis Vuitton on the screen right now, 4-day chart. Yeah, it's off, but sort of not. Hermes, the same thing. You know, the markets are taking all this mumbo jumbo of the last half hour in stride.
Yep. I mean, the dollar continues its strength. So when Katie Greifeld goes over to Paris for the Olympics with Gus, I mean, you're going to have some good purchasing power over there in Paris, Tom. So I think, you know,
Right.
I think
Should
you
we
can
get
hop over.
Greifeld in and ask if Gus is going to swim in the river?
Yeah, I don't think so. So
I don't think so.
yeah, I'm looking at WTI crude oil, still elevated here, just over $82 a barrel, off a little bit here today, but still interesting. And I'll call out Bitcoin for you, Tom. I know you're dying to get to that. 57,000. Thing, you know, was it $73,000 just, you know, a cup of coffee ago, as you would say? Here we are.
And 55,000 on Sunday, trades 24/7, folks. And, you know, I noticed trying to keep up with the news flow that do we have a why we've gone from 70-something thousand down?
I do not. I think it's just risk off, you know, and so we're starting to see the
You
pullback.
okay over there?
We're all right.
Was this the gin and tonics?
Yeah, it might have been.
It might have been. Let me go to Lisa Mateo here. We're lining up some guests for you. We welcome all of you on YouTube as well. Lisa, this in, and you know, I'm sorry. It's like I'm trying to get to it right now. It's baby names. I just got in from Hennessy Digital. Baby names, and
no more Joe.
It's
and
like,
Mary
where's Paul?
Yeah, nowhere.
Or Tom?
No.
Where is Lisa? Thank you, Laura Burns, for this. This is from Hennessy Digital. Come on, Lisa, help me here. Dylan is number one.
Okay,
That's a big one.
And then Lily tells me the 2 vacation days I have all year. Parker, Aurora,
Oh, please.
Isla,
What?
Kai, Kai, Ryder,
Really?
Daisy. Okay, Daisy sounds like, you know, something from the 40s, I guess. Jasmine, you got to have a Jasmine. I mean, there's
no Michael.
But
There's
no-
no Michael.
No Tom?
There's no Lisa. There's no Thomas. There's no. It's all these wacko names. Who would name? Come on, Delia. Okay, I can see that as a family name. That's cool.
I don't know. It's just, you know, when we named our youngest Aiden, and now there's like a million Aidens out there. I thought we were.
Well, that was Irish, though. I mean, you'd see that.
we
That's
went the Irish route. Kieran,
Okay.
Aiden, all that kind of
Speaking of Irish, let's go the Irish route right now. What we're doing is we're continuing the trend of only speaking to Red Sox fans.
Oh, man.
This morning, Michael McKee joins us here. It's a-
You'll be happy to know I watched the game last night at the home of a rabid Yankees fan.
Very good.
And I wore my Red Sox cap and
Nice.
tried not to, you know, make too much fun of them.
It's fun. I mean, to say the least, I've been talking about the Yankees as a reincarnation of 1927, and that's gone, you know, wrong, Tom, wrong. Again, can we catch up? I'm a big believer, Mike, that the discussion has shifted away from Fed watching and this idiotic parlor game of what our future's going to do, over to a look at the real economy. Basically, folks, on a Hicksian basis, this is going from the LM curve over to the IS curve. Okay, the real economy. What do the experts at the Fed think about the real economy right now?
They think the underlying economy is pretty strong.
Solid is the word.
Surprisingly so, solid. And that we are seeing a slowdown as anticipated and desired by the Fed. It took longer than they thought, and we're still waiting for prices to change in the housing market. But other than that, they're relatively sanguine about the economy and its prospects at the moment. It's hard to know because they've
Right.
been wrong before. We've all been wrong because it's been a weird post-pandemic economy. But right now,
Okay.
they're figuring it's about as good as they could hope for.
You had the photo of the weekend, except for Sir Lewis winning the British Grand Prix endeavors. You had the photo of the weekend. You were in a store somewhere, and there was a sign that said, "Hello, we've lowered all our prices."
Yeah.
Is that within the American culture, or is that a marketing gimmick at some big box store?
Well, it's a big box store, and I'm sure it's a marketing gimmick to put up a sign like that. But we have heard anecdotal reports of that happening at many stores lately, and I think what people are grocery people are doing in particular is trying to reach out to people and reassure them that if you come to our store, you're not paying that terrible inflation.
So we're speaking of inflation. Let's go to CPI on Thursday here. Month to month, ex food and energy, 0.2% in line with last month. Annualize that, because I like to live in an annualized world, 3.4%. How's the Fed going to view a number like that? Is that a job well done or more work to do?
More work to do. That's their whole mantra right now. CPI, of course, runs hotter than PCE, which is their target. The headline CPI is expected on a year-over-year basis to go down.
Right.
So they will consider it progress towards what they're trying to accomplish.
One more question, because the interns. Matt Miller's got a couple interns, and we weren't sure when we get him within his busy morning. One more. Oh, Matt Miller on YouTube there. Mike McKee, what does Chairman Powell not want to say in his testimony?
Well, he doesn't want to say when they're going to cut interest rates. He doesn't want to promise that they're going to cut interest rates. He's going to give the same response that he has been giving, that we have more work to do, and at some point, perhaps it is going to be possible to cut interest rates, but we're not there yet.
Michael McKee, thank you so much. Running all of our economic coverage, just really decisive here. And Paul, did you mention we have inflation data this week?
Yeah, we got some CPI stuff. We got some PPI on Friday, which I won't be here to see, but you guys enjoy that. But CPI is going to be the key thing here on Thursday.
He's off again?
Another
Friday?
Summer Fridays.
What am I doing?
It's the
Taking
Jersey
month?
Shore.
I get the month of November, right?
Yes.
Thank you. It's great. Joining us right now, we're going to talk 30 seconds about his new show. 9 a.m. this morning, Sonali Basak, the Sonali Basak, Katie Greifeld show with Matt Miller. What are you going to do at 9:00 this morning on Open Interest?
We're going to talk to Mike Wilson from Morgan Stanley.
Nice.
He's our first guest this morning on our first show.
Right.
And he's one of the last bears standing on Wall Street. I don't know how he would respond to that characterization, but I'm going to say it, so I guess we'll hear. He has said in the past, he has a target right now of 5,400 on the S&P, but it could just as easily be 4,500. Right. And I think it seems like Wall Street's done with these big, bold targets, right?
Right.
Michael Kantorowicz over at Piper has said he's not going to put it at an S&P target anymore. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
It's walking away.
Conversation.
Matt, we don't care. You're only here because Sir Lewis won. Was that outstanding? This weekend to see a 39-year-old win.
I dedicate my week. It is amazing, but I dedicate my weekends to the MotoGP, which is a far more interesting motor racing series.
I think.
No one listening from sea to shining sea knows what you're talking about.
Well, listen. Let me just say. So it's the F1, the motorcycle racing sort of F1 equivalent, and it's the best pilots in the entire world. Ducati is world champion the last 2 years in a row, and Pecco Bagnaia, the Ducati pilot, won yesterday the race in Germany, and followed by a couple other guys on Ducatis, Marc Marquez and his brother Alex Marquez.
Paul, you have him go live in Germany for 5 years. And they get these wacko sports like.
Tom, I'm all into this motocross because look what I bought this weekend.
You bought? Look at that.
A little Vespa scooter.
Send me that photo.
So I am all in on this whole motorcycle thing. I think I'm now in the club with Matt Miller.
Dude, how much fun is it? How much fun is it?
So much fun. Yeah, cruising around the Jersey Shore.
I was on a Vespa. I tried one out. Bow tie and the whole thing. The guy said, "Please don't. It's a brand destruction. Don't get a Vespa." Let me get back to Formula One, because you interviewed Pierre Gasly the other day. It's been boring with Verstappen winning every single week. It's like the Yankees winning 150 games.
But
and the
you know
last
what?
2 races have been magical.
And next year, I mean, the same thing is happening in MotoGP that's happening in Formula One, because Marc Marquez is maybe the greatest motorcycle racer of all time, and he's going to go into Ducati's factory team next year, which is like the pinnacle, right? You have Lewis Hamilton going into Ferrari's factory team next year, which is considered the pinnacle, even though they haven't really been winning of late. It's exciting to watch, and I think everyone is looking to these old school champions to revive these.
You're a legitimate wrench head. John Farrow and I are watching Formula One and all that, but you actually get the train. What's the difference between the cars that just can't go as fast? Like
well, in
Haas
Formula One, it's all
Aston-
about the aero. It's all about the aero in Formula
What's
One.
the aero?
They see the
Aerodynamics.
Oh, the aerodynamics.
Yeah, and so if you have a better aero setup, your car is going to go those 2 or 3 tenths faster.
Lisa's shaking her
I
head.
need to plug this. I got producers in my ear. Hosted by Bloomberg's Matt Miller, Katie Greifeld, and Shonali Bassick, Bloomberg Open Interest will air daily from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, live from Bloomberg's Global Headquarters in New York.
What Katie and Shonali have to put up with? Are you kidding me?
I know.
We have Howard Marks on today, which is going to be fascinating. And we have the CEO of Lamborghini coming on, Stefan Winkelmann.
Okay.
So there you go.
We have Greg Jensen from the largest hedge fund in the world, Bridgewater.
Well, that'd be good. Greg Jensen is somebody who's really original within the business. 9 a.m. this morning, look for Matthew Miller, Catherine Greifeld, Shonali Bassick here with a really important 2 hours on Bloomberg television. Paul, we got to get back to the markets here. The 2-year yield, 4.62%. The Sweeney yield still elevated. I'm sorry, money market funds are still clocking, what, a 4.80? 4.80?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's go to Michael Barr. Get a little.
I think we should. With our news in New York City, too short, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom Paul. Lisa Beryl has made landfall as a hurricane in South Texas. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Curlin has more.
Hurricane Beryl has made landfall near Matagorda, Texas this morning. It is moving off towards the north at about 12 miles an hour. Sustained winds are 80 miles an hour, but it will be weakening now that it's moving inland. It's expected to be a tropical storm later this morning. It's going to bring some very heavy rain to portions of eastern and southeastern Texas, especially to the southwest of the Houston area this morning. It'll then lift up through northeastern Texas. Lots of areas in eastern Texas are likely to see flash flooding over the next 24 hours. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you very much, Rob. President Joe Biden will shift this week from focusing on campaigning for re-election to hosting a NATO summit. European leaders gather in Washington starting tomorrow to celebrate the alliance's 75th anniversary. Meanwhile, Democratic lawmakers continue to discuss concerns about Biden's ability to stay in the presidential race. Biden says he's staying in.
We got a lot to do, folks, but we can do it. We're on the cusp of getting so much done.
President Joe Biden at a campaign event in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania yesterday. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Hey, Michael Barr, can you see you and me on a Vespa? You know,
you know what? Now, very quickly.
Or a Piaggio?
They'll laugh at me if I'm on a Vespa. But see, the Vespa, it's a one-piece. The engine is hooked up right to the rear wheel. There's no chain. I mean, that's a great design.
It's made in Tuscany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get a Negroni when you get off it?
Yeah, exactly.
You
Darn right I do. I drove that thing right off the lot and right home down to the...
Really?
Yes. Right
and
down.
it says here that tall people can... I could see a Vespa in my future.
Yeah. I could see
you
Lisa
see me
Mateo
tooling down
zipping
Fifth
around.
Avenue?
Yeah.
Put the Bentley in the garage and I'm on my Bentley,
Bingo, there you go.
Bow tie flip. I mean, it would work. Bloomberg Surveillance. Be nice, Michael.
and Markets. Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a slight lift to the market. We have NASDAQ futures up 4 points, Dow futures up 27 points, S&P futures up a point. We have the 2-year yield, 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.30%, and that's up 2 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen, euro weaker, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin, that's lower at 57,156. Shares of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, they're higher, up 3% after its price target raised at Morgan Stanley. Sticking with tech, we'll check in with Intel shares up 3%. And finally, battery maker LG Energy Solution, they reported second quarter profit, missed estimates, sales of electric vehicles continuing to slow. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Yeah, where is that, Paul? I mean, you're the one buying a, what is it called, a Piaggio?
Piaggio, Vespa Piaggio. Yeah, it's a cool little
you smoke
scooter.
Chatage like French cigarettes while you're on this thing.
Exactly.
You wear a helmet, right?
Wear a helmet. Absolutely. Go safe all the time. It goes about 40 miles an hour. It'll get you up and down the Jersey Shore. No,
but
no, no,
not
no
on the
big
Parkway.
roads. No, not on the Parkway, not on the Turnpike.
Where do you
stuff.
put it? Like just in the
we have
driveway?
parking lot, just right next to the.
I don't know where I'd put it.
Yeah, right in the parking lot.
I could just.
It's all
we'll
good.
Have to see. Okay, well, let's do this. We got a really good newspapers today.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
And the front page is the Lisa Mateo Show. It's brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups, no built-in spreads, and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds, and we thank IBKR foundational to making surveillance go. Lisa, I thought it was a great list. What do you got?
All right, boomer. Not sure if you guys have done this, but a lot of boomers are passing their wealth earlier to their millennial kids. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a catch, though.
Yeah, it's called tuition.
They're telling Business Insider, the kids, if they get the money now, they're not going to expect that inheritance later. So you take it now, enjoy it, because you're not getting anything later. They can give them yearly cash gifts, paying for grandkids, though, to go to private school, go to college. They're helping them with down payments for homes. But the millennials are saying they could use the help because what they made, compared to what their parents did at that same time is not the same.
Yeah, there's something that shifted here. This came up this weekend. I mean, when we were kids, you knew you'd go 3, 4, 5 steps down from your parents, If you grew up advantaged, you knew you weren't advantaged. My first apartment was above a pizza parlor on Monroe Avenue, down from Gitsy's hot dogs, and every night at 2 a.m. the cockroaches came upstairs. Oh, no. The kids don't want to do that now.
No,
they don't. They don't want to do.
I don't know.
What we did.
But that transfer of wealth, I mean, you hear it from these financial advisors. They're saying it's going to be trillions of dollars from the baby boomer generation to the next. And how do you get it from one generation to the next in the most tax-efficient way? And that is an industry in and of itself.
I'll go with that. But also for me, and what's important here is what do they do with the money? I mean,
I told my kids the last check I write, it's going to bounce, baby. So,
there we go. Yep. Cruel and unusual Sweeney. Next.
So we talked about higher housing costs, right? Because that's the problem. A lot of kids can't afford to get the house. But it's also pushing couples to move in together earlier. So I know I moved in with my husband before we were married.
Oh boy.
Dad wasn't happy, but that's another story in itself.
Too much information.
Yeah.
But it did help, financially, because we were able to split the rent. So a lot of couples are doing that. But the problem is relationship experts are saying that it's causing some friction within the couples. So they're breaking apart earlier. But hey, I'm going on 25 years, so it worked for me.
Exactly. It worked for you.
But it's not working for everybody, and that's the problem. So,
all right. But that you can see the economics. The housing affordability is just a huge issue.
Yeah, but the biggest thing in the country, can we all agree, the biggest thing is a single tax, joint tax differential. I don't get.
Okay.
They want to promote being married, so if you're joint, you pay less taxes than if you're single. I never got it.
No.
It's a big number. I mean, for a lot of people.
All right. What else?
What
we
else
got?
do you have, Lisa?
Okay.
That's way too much information, Ms. Mateo.
There we go. Retailers, they're rushing to ship their holiday goods earlier because they want to beat the rising freight costs. You have companies like Maersk saying that they're going to increase the freight costs, so they want to get ahead of it, right? So they're booking their peak season forward, moving goods from December holidays as early as April and May instead of July and October, because they don't want to risk the empty shelves that we saw during the pandemic. So they're moving these dates up higher, but it's a risk.
Why are freight costs rising? Is it because of oil, or is it the upset in the Red Sea?
I was about to say the Red Sea. It's a lot to do with the Red Sea and
this
how they have
This is a
to
good Financial
shift
Times.
around.
This is a good Financial Times, and attacks on ships in the Red Sea have forced carriers to take longer transit routes, injecting unpredictability into global supply chains that increase port congestion from Asia to the U.S. East Coast. So, but again, that means more inventory on the retailers' balance sheet. So that could be a margin issue. Oh, that's interesting.
Right, because they're hoping that they have the consumer demand. Hoping.
That's right.
Can I just interject here that we did the children's names thing earlier?
Yep.
Yes.
You know, as a slot, I'm getting the amount of hate mail I'm getting.
Oh no!
It's off the chart. Everybody named their daughter Daphne, and it's my fault. I was making fun of it. I'm sorry, folks. I meant no ill will. Lisa, maybe
You're just a messenger.
We'll
That's
start
it.
calling you Olive. How about that? That was one of the names on the list.
Oh my goodness! No.
Next.
No, thank you.
Now, what kind of socks are you wearing on your feet when you wear sneakers? Let's say, are you wearing the low-cut socks or the high-cut socks? Because it's kind of an indication of how old you are. So I don't know. I wear the low-cut socks.
Me too.
But apparently it's this controversy that's kicking around about your sock height. So the higher socks, where it covers the ankles, you know, like
and
they used to do
even
back
with
in the
sneakers,
day.
they wear the dark socks, which I would have got laughed off the playground if I did that back in the day.
But now it's the opposite. So you have this shift. So now it's popular to wear the higher cut socks and not the low ones. Apparently, I'm not the cool mom anymore. I was told that a million times. So this is a new thing. Teens and Gen Z, they're wearing the higher socks.
It's important here, and I go to surveillance fashion slave Michael Darda of MKM Advisors. I mean, MKM Roth, I should say. And, you know, Darda wears the socks with, like, the flip-flops or the Birkenstocks.
With the little slides?
No-go.
I mean, you know, this is a major source of conversation. You know, Afterthought almost threw a baked potato at me.
Yep.
I mean, what do you think, Lisa? Socks with sandals?
The kids do that with the little slides they wear or the Birkenstocks.
Darda's styling that. You know.
I know.
Yeah.
He's out on some island somewhere, and you know, what do you think? I mean, help me on YouTube live chat. I mean, should I be
when we need you?
I can see me in the Doc Martin slides with the socks. What you know?
But you have to be the high cut the socks. You can't wear the ankle socks anymore, apparently.
Ankle socks aren't
yes.
cool.
It says that it means you're 30 plus.
Back in the 70s, going back, you had the white athletic socks up to the knees.
Oh yeah, like the basketball players.
Yeah, and then maybe some wigwams on top of it. We wore two socks.
Right.
So we had the tube socks going up to the knee. Then we had what's are called wigwams. Go Google that. Go Google that. Wigwams.
Yes. And you kind of push them down. You scrunch them down.
That's what you wore. In Trenton CYO basketball, that was the uniform back in the day.
If I can bring this back to something to do with economics, finance, investment. I'm sorry, this weekend, inflation is pernicious. It's out there in every single transaction. And the bow ties, the suit and tie crew we talk to, they're not talking the same thing I'm living or anybody else is living. It's tangible, the inflation. It's every single thing.
It's every. You see it in the restaurant. You see it at the grocery store. You see it. Did you see the price of the bow ties? Did they go up?
Yeah, they did.
See?
Yes, thank you. It's a French provider. I think they'll still be in business after the French election.
But it's just the absolute level of prices. And so the question I've here, when will we get accustomed to this new level?
We'll get accustomed to it when our wages go up.
Yeah, but the wages have been going up faster than inflation in the last couple of years, but still not there. Still not there, I think. So that's the question. When will we all become accustomed to this new price level that we don't think about anymore?
Lisa Mateo with a strong newspaper segment here on a Monday.
Solid.
Thank you so much as well. Green on the screen, that's what's important here. It continues. Paul, the arch issue here, if you're either in these stocks or you're not in these stocks, and if you're in these stocks, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just amazing. I think, the tech names,
Right.
I don't know how you're an investor in the last 20 years and not be at least market weight tech.
Francine Lacroix insisted we play a giant French tune for all of France. Francis Cabral.
Truqueur sur l'honneur et qui jure, faut pas que ça vous inquiète. J'ai bien connu l'animal mort dans votre assiette. Un sale temps sur la planète. Oh, le drôle de temps.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo as well. We welcome all of you. A huge week ending with bank earnings. It's an odd earnings schedule. We've got JP Morgan, Citigroup here on Friday. starting us off on earnings, Bank of America into next week as well. And of course, all of the market activity wrapped around the shock of the politics of the moment. We've looked at London, we've looked at Paris, really going to look into an eventful week for the president of the United States, including NATO meetings, I believe, in Washington as well. Our guest coming up here is so important. I want to get right to it. Paul, your first observation besides the heat wave.
Tim Craighead he's the Director of Research and Senior European Strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. We're going to get to him in a minute, Tom. But the heat wave has been extraordinary, and we've got European politics front and center. I think a lot of American investors need to kind of pay a little bit of a focus here on that.
But the market's not moving all that much. I thought we'd get a bit greater move in the euro, and we just flat out haven't. I guess that's a good omen there right now. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, and we've got green on the screen after last week's rally on Wall Street. We have a lot of things on tap. Inflation figures, comments from Fed Chair Jay Powell, bank earnings, all in focus this week. So ahead of all this, we have NASDAQ futures up about 4 points, Dow futures up 27 points, the S&P futures up about a point. We have the 2-year yield at 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.31%, and that's up 2 basis points. European stocks edging higher. France's snap election. We have the CAC in Paris up about 0.1%. SOX 600 up about 0.3%. Shares of Paramount, they're higher, up nearly 3%. It agreed to merge with Skydance. And Boeing, it's agreed to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy in connection with 2 fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jetliner. Those shares up nearly 1%. And Microsoft, they're telling their employees in China to use iPhones for work from September, cutting off Android devices. Shares up about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Sort of an odd Monday here because everybody's out with unlike me and Paul, people have real lives and they go places. Our next guest, Paul, has sort of done the Tour de France thing where you go down in the south of France near Grenoble.
Yep.
And you go, you bicycle over a mountain pass and you go hiking, and he's braver than I would be.
I mean, south of France for me is, at this time of year, I grab a bottle of rosé and I sit down on the deck and enjoy the view. But some people,
why don't you bring it? He survived.
Exactly. I mean, at almost 9,000 feet, you bicycle over this mountain pass, and that's what our next guest did this past week. Tim Craighead, he's the Director of Research and Senior European Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, based in London. Tim, what were you guys doing last week in France?
Well, I suppose you could say it's father-son bonding or something along those lines. But yeah, I was with my son and a friend, and we cycled up a mountain called the Galibier to see stage 4 of the Tour de France. And the next day we cycled nearby up another famous French mountain called the Alpe d'Huez. So we had a good time, and then did a little bit of rock climbing the day after that.
I knew it.
So
I told you. Why wouldn't you do a little rock climbing after doing that silliness? All right, Tim, you've got a real job, a day job, and that's trying to find some values for Bloomberg Intelligence clients in the European and equity markets. Let's start with the UK here. Big political news over the past week. How does that impact bringing Labour into the government? How does it impact the outlook for UK equities?
I think you may have a pretty interesting opportunity for the UK to be a bit of calm in the storm, at least from a geopolitical perspective. Keir Starmer and the Labour government has come in with something of a pro-growth strategy, but certainly something that is that's stable. Rachel Reeves, the new chancellor, came in and had a big announcement earlier this morning, and she's talking about smoothing out the planning and development process to push for home building, to push for wind, to push for infrastructure. Those are all things that are pro-growth.
Right.
And one of those phrases is crowding in private investment as opposed to crowding it out. So I think that there are at least interesting opportunities to consider, and that's at a time when there's potential gridlock in France. Who knows what's going on from a stateside perspective? So instead of for years being a mess, there's calm, and that's pretty interesting at 11.5 times forward earnings.
Yeah, I'm amazed at the PE. I'm looking at the forward multiple on BT, British Telecom, and it's an 8. I mean, it's trading like General Motors as well. Tim Craighead, you're one of the best I know at straddling the Atlantic Ocean. From your view in London, with all of your iconic work at Goldman Sachs and now at Bloomberg Intelligence, do you believe in American exceptionalism? Is there something different in the air here versus Paris or London?
I think there's certainly a difference from the standpoint of just where the U.S. is from a technology, and literally I mean technology perspective, and that has fed on itself at a point in time where you've got the shift towards the internet and then how to use the internet with 5G and now layer on AI. And there's just not the bevy of companies to drive that here, and win begets win, and obviously you see what's happened with the S&P 500. There is an opportunity for development here, but it's a question of just simply the base of companies to push that. Hopefully, you end up with a base of education and science and development. You think about the number of Nobel Prize winners that have come from the UK over time. It's extraordinary, especially given the size of the country. But getting that to actually feed through into business and things you can invest in has clearly been a problem for the past 20 years relative to what we've seen in the States.
Hey, Tim, how about in France, another political moment there for our good friends in France here. What's the knock-on effect from an investment perspective in France? Because they just had, a month or so ago, welcome to France. All these business leaders came to France trying to promote business opportunities in France. What do the elections mean for the investment opportunities there?
So I think you've got a fork in the road. There's a positive one and there's a concerning one. The positive one is that Macron can actually form an alliance with his group, with the centrist element of the left, which has surprisingly won the election. If they can pull that together, then a lot of what's been the French growth story and the ongoing European project could continue, and that's a relative stability, and that probably takes a bit of the elevated risk premium away. Good for investing. The other fork is that the left really does push things and somehow gets a majority or a lead in whatever government does form in France following the election, and that's going to be pro-labor, not great from an investment perspective, and could push finances and French yields up relative to, say, Germany and the rest of Europe. That's not a good investment outcome.
Tim, I'm trying to keep up with Paul Sweeney. He went out and bought a Vespa this weekend so he could smoke Chardon cigarettes and wear a black beret or whatever. But Tim Craighead, is there almost a speculation opportunity in beleaguered French large caps, including the banks, the luxury stocks, and that? Does Tim Craighead and Bloomberg Intelligence London say literally buy Paris?
I think you can look at buying certain elements of the European market and France specifically based on the underlying elements of the business, but I don't know that I would say buy France or buy Paris, buy the CAC. I would say French luxury, which is a global good and one that if there is a Chinese recovery, there's ongoing growth from a U.S. luxury goods perspective, that stands on its own 2 feet. For example, but I wouldn't say necessarily buy France. Laurent Dulé, who's our strategist focusing on the core of Europe, and he's there in Paris, had a really interesting note out this morning, and he's a bit concerned with where the left could take things from the standpoint of yield, etc.
Tim, this has been great. Would you tell your son he's very lucky to have a dad that would do that? I just would have gone to Grenoble. Arturi is there, the great music house. I would have just gone to Grenoble like you, Paul, and had a rosé.
Yep, exactly.
Tim Craighead, climb safe. Use a rope when you're climbing these mountains. That's what Michael Barr uses. When Michael Barr is tackling the mountain sides of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, he's always got, the It's like the Walt Disney movie, The Matterhorn, from a
exactly.
few years ago. He's out there. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Several influential congressional Democrats said privately on Sunday they want President Joe Biden to step aside as the party's White House nominee. The latest defections include several Democratic leaders of House committees. An unexpected result of France's snap election, a surprise win by a left-wing coalition in the country's parliamentary elections, could send France into political gridlock. The new Popular Front won the most seats in Sunday's vote, but was around 100 short of majority. Right-wing National Rally Party leader Marine Le Pen says the outcome will hurt France.
France is going to be totally deadlocked with three groups of roughly equal size in the National Assembly. So that's the way to go. It's unfortunate we will lose another year of illegal immigration, another year of purchasing power loss, another year of insecurity exploding in our country.
The National Rally's Marine Le Pen speaking there through an interpreter. Her party won 143 seats, while President Emmanuel Macron's allies secured 156, and the new Popular Front got the most with 178. Wildfires in the West prompted evacuations and threatened homes. Extreme conditions are fueling at least 20 wildfires in California. In Mariposa County, the French fire broke out July 4th. Sheriff Jeremy Breesy.
There's still active hotspots. There's still other hazards that occur inside of a fire area when a fire burns. And so, that could be a smoldering tree burning for a few days.
One fire in Santa Barbara County exploded over the weekend, burning more than 16,000 acres. Last night, authorities said the fire was within a mile of Neverland Ranch, the 2,700-acre former home of Michael Jackson. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom Paul, Lisa.
Michael, you had great coverage of this weekend, and we're all living this. And folks, I can't emphasize enough, my amateur take is when you get stressed by the heat, it happens quickly. It's none of this gradual stuff. It comes on suddenly. I have, Michael Barr, as you mentioned earlier, highs in Las Vegas 118. That's not this humidity stuff. That's the temperature.
That's the temperature. Actually, it hit 120.
Yeah, coming up. And Dubai is 108.
Yeah.
I've been in that in Dubai, and it's hot, and you get to the next air-conditioned place, but there's no humidity. This is different.
Yeah. The heat, that's why we have this heat index, the real feel, all that kind of stuff here.
It's real.
Yeah, with the humidity. Yep.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but this weekend I look, it's a 92, and the heat index is 102.
I know it's a cliche when we say it's but the humidity. But you know what? When you, at 120 degrees, and then in Death Valley it hits 128 degrees.
And there was a fatality there.
Yeah, the motorcycle rider. It's hot.
All I can say is be careful. Good morning on YouTube Live Chat. Somebody down near Houston without electricity right now because of the hurricane.
Yep. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah.
This tropical storm, whatever. And be careful out there, folks. This is serious stuff. It's certainly not going away. Green on the screen from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a busy week on the economic calendar, so let's get right to it. Tomorrow, things kick off. We have Fed Chair Jay Powell delivering the Fed's semi-annual testimony to the Senate Banking Committee, and then he appears before the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. Thursday, we get a look at CPI for June, as well as initial jobless claims for last week. And Friday, we're on to the Producer Price Index. Now, ahead of all this, we have NASDAQ futures up about 13 points, Dow futures up 41 points, S&P futures up about 2 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. The 10-year yield at 4.30%, and that's up 2 basis points. Commodities, oil edging lower after 4 straight weekly gains. We have Brent crude $86 a barrel, WTI crude at $82 a barrel. Some deal-making news. We have Eli Lilly agreed to buy biopharmaceutical company Morphic Holding for $57 per share in cash. Morphic Holding soaring up more than 75%. You have Eli Lilly up about 0.3%. And then Danish brewer Carlsberg buying UK Pepsi supplier Britvic for $4.2 billion. Carlsberg up more than 4% in Copenhagen. And I didn't know it was a thing, but apparently people still write checks at retail stores, but Target saying no more. July 15th, they are no longer accepting personal checks.
Wow.
That's your Bloomberg's Business Flash, Tom and Paul.
Do you write a lot of checks?
I don't. Honestly, I don't.
I write like 1, 2 a month.
A month?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
hardly.
Okay.
Everything's all digital.
Yep.
It's all digital.
Megan Horniman's down in Maryland. She has a quill. She dips it in the ink and gets a check out to write it for the various and sundry children. Megan Horniman. Finally, we get to the markets. It's 8:18 Wall Street time.
Finally getting to the markets.
We've hardly touched the markets here. Tim Craig had helped.
That's a good start, though.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us. Let's try to stay away from the political maelstrom we have in London, Paris, and Washington. Megan, and she's with Verdens Capital, their CIO. Megan, how do you summon the courage to add new money to this bull market?
I wish I had the courage to do that. I do not. Instead, I'd rather sit with cash on the sidelines right now. Really? From a valuation perspective, I think it's fully pricing in perfection. And in that environment, you want to be very cautious. What you can do is take a look at your portfolios, make sure that you're in balance, that some of the things that have run up, 20-25% this year, that you're not overweight some of those sectors. But be patient. This market is pricing. These valuations are very pricey and very expensive right now. There's no need to rush into this.
So, Megan, are you concerned, or how concerned are you about the fact that this market's really been led by a handful of big tech names, and you pull those out and performance hasn't been that great?
Yeah, that concerns me quite a bit. And if you look at, take just the S&P 500 aside and look at some of the different market caps. So whether you're looking at Russell 2000 or the Russell Mid Cap, these stocks haven't participated either. So if you look at the returns that you've gotten year to date on even the Dow Jones, this doesn't look anything like a very strong bull market to me. This is a handful of stocks, and the rest of these areas of the equity market are telling us that there's some strain in the economy. There's some concern. These are areas that we're actually looking to maybe get into, but it's just a little too early.
If we get a disinflationary vector, there's a point where the Sweeney money market fund, Paul, what is it, 5.2?
Yeah,
5.1%.
Nice place to be.
Megan, where does it, there's got to be like not a kink in the curve, but a tip point where the yield comes down and everybody changes their mindset. Where in your mind is that yield? Is it 4.8? Is it 4.3? Dare I say 3.9?
Well, I think it also, if it depends on if it comes along with, let's remember, if the Fed's cutting rates, that's because there's a concern in the economy. So all these people that are saying that they're going to cut rates in September, but yet the economy's doing great, it doesn't make any sense to me. So if the Fed's going to be cutting rates, if there is a bigger concern in the economy, that's what we think they're going to end up doing is when that ends up happening. In that event, you would typically see that equities would come down as well. So you'll get this valuation correction in the equity market. That may be where we get some money. The actual pinpoint, whether it's 3.8, 4.8, it depends clearly on what's going on from the equity side and have those valuations corrected enough to warrant the risk of going into that.
So let's talk about valuation. How do you think about valuation in this market? Do you look at it as a whole where that could be troublesome, or do you try to pull out some of those high-tech, high PE names?
So you can do that very simply by just pulling out the Russell 1000 growth out of the entire market and looking at the rest of it. If you look at the Russell 1000 value, that's large cap stocks, but those valuations are more, I guess you could say, realistic. The valuations in the small and mid cap space are very cheap in relative to the large cap space, but yet the earnings picture is very unclear there. So that's why we're kind of waiting a little bit to get into that part of the market.
Well, we're about to start up, believe it or not, another earnings season with the big banks coming up here. What are you looking for from corporate America in terms of earnings, if in fact this market is expensive?
I think some of the things that we'll be looking for is what are they seeing in the economy? Are they slowing down hiring? Are they seeing that they're still able, specifically from the consumer side, to pass on high prices? Because what does that mean for margins? We'll also be looking at guidance because there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't want to talk about the political side, as you mentioned, but we do have an election coming up here in the second half. What are they thinking there? How are they positioning themselves at the corporate level?
Megan, what is the revenue line going to do if revenues are made up of unit dynamics and price dynamics? I guess there's the Jack Welch idea of pricing power, but all of a sudden we got signs Michael McKee saw in this weekend we're lowering prices. Do you have any observation at Verdant's Capital that we're actually finally seeing a leveling of prices that will diminish revenue growth?
I think you're seeing a leveling of prices and disinflationary in certain areas in goods. So that may help specific companies more than others, but you're not seeing it in the service sector. So you can continue to see they're passing on those higher prices in the service sector. When you look at some areas of inflation, even though we're looking at the broad consumer price index that's decelerating, some areas of that, specifically in the service side, are still growing well over 5% on a year-over-year basis.
And Paul, that's the issue here. I mean, we had a hardwired revenue growth, folks, of 2%, 4%, 6% was a big number. All of a sudden, Paul, we got a pandemic pop where 8% is something on the edge of normal. Megan, where does that come back to?
I think I don't know if it can come back completely to pre-pandemic levels, but I do think, again, like I said, it's different areas of the equity market, different companies, who's still able to pass on prices and who is not. You're seeing things like your Walmarts of the world, these rolling back of prices. You're starting to see that there, but that's all goods again. It's not necessarily the service side.
Paul, Walmart, I mean, if I could type correctly, I'm so rattled by Megan. Paul went out and bought a Vespa this weekend. I can't think straight. Paul, Walmart's forward PE is at 29.
I know, for a retailer.
And they're doing it, to Megan's point, they're doing that on single digit, I'll be charitable, mid-single digit growth.
Yep.
That's none of the books.
Look at the free cash flow. That's what they're going to tell you to look at. Megan, real quick, fixed income, where should we be playing here?
I'd be a little cautious, like defensive and positioning from a duration standpoint. And the reason for that is if we're talking about the Fed cutting interest rates, that's typically because the economy's weakening. So you would want to invest in longer term fixed income. That's where you're going to get the best price appreciation. However, here at Verdant's, we're very concerned about the budget deficit and what that means for the amount of Treasury supply that is going to be coming over the next couple of years. And when you're talking about this supply, we've been very lucky to always have a lot of demand for U.S. Treasuries, but that's been weakening a bit this year. All these auctions have not been fantastic. It's either good or they're really bad. So I think you'll still see volatility in that long end of the curve. We'll just stay intermediate, intermediate duration. That's a good place to be within fixed income. Remember, credit quality is important as well, especially if the economy is weakening, because spreads are not giving you that reward for taking on that extra risk.
Megan, thank you so much. Megan Horniman with a brief there. CIO, Verdant's Capital Advisors in Maryland. That was a breath of fresh air to do something where we didn't have to talk politics or polling.
Talking stocks and bonds and valuation and all that kind of stuff. Again, we got earnings starting to kick in later this week, and get ready for it.
In this incredible busy day, we have just learned Terry Haines will join us here on a Monday of the President of the United States. Terry Haines in the 9 o'clock hour as well. Green on the screen, small caps do well. That means Lori Calvasini can show up from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got NASDAQ futures up about 12 points, Dow futures up 50 points, S&P futures up about 3 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.63%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up about 1 basis point. European stocks starting edge higher. Traders weighing the unexpected French election and results. And we have the CAC in Paris right now up just a bit right now. We have the stock 600 up about 0.3%. We have companies making news like Samsung. Thousands of workers are kicking off a 3-day strike to demand better pay. And then you have Burberry reporting planning to cut hundreds of jobs. That's following a sharp drop in its stock market value. That's according to the Telegraph. Their shares up nearly 2% in London. And then the Apple Watch getting an upgrade. Bloomberg reporting that the company is going to make some changes to models that include larger displays, a thinner new look, and also a new chip. It's all to celebrate as it approaches its 10th birthday. Shares up about 0.6%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Economic indicators, Lisa Mateo, brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth. With advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies, grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. And with their leadership on a quiet Monday, we're going to a hellacious Thursday and Friday, CPI, PPI, jobless claims, and all the rest. Joining us now, Michelle Meyer. She's with MasterCard in Bulletproof Economics, of course, weaned with Ethan Harris at Bank of America and all that. And the chief economist, and she knows more about what we spend than any other economist on the planet. The great miscalculation has been, woe is me, the consumer, and you flat out disagree. What do we get wrong about woe is me, the consumer?
I mean, I think for the last several years, there's been this narrative that the consumer won't be able to survive the combination of prices rising, interest rates increasing, the uncertainty that was lingering in the economy coming out of the pandemic. And the reality is that the consumer, as many people have talked about, has been resilient, but I would argue has been even more than resilient, has really managed to come through this cycle in a solid way, right? When you look at the fact that the labor market has been very supportive for consumers across the board, healthy wage growth, a lot of churn in the workforce, which is always very powerful in terms of creating an environment where there's better job matching as well, and balance sheets that were cleaned up after the pandemic hit, right? A lot of people deleveraged. They used the transfer payments that came in, the stimulus funds, in a responsible way. And the consumer now is making a lot of choices, but still very much out there engaging in the economy. And that underpins not only the U.S. economy, it underpins the global economy as well, I would argue.
What are you seeing in terms of credit card debt? Some people will cite that as a concern for the consumer. The consumer's drawn down most of their savings. Now we're seeing credit card debt creep up, delinquencies creep up. What are you seeing from MasterCard's perspective?
So we don't have the ability to look at that ourselves. Of course, we rely on the public data that's out there. So the Federal Reserve's survey, I love the New York Fed's quarterly household survey. It's a comprehensive look at the state of household balance sheets. And certainly we have seen household debt increase. If you look at the increase in household debt relative to income or relative to inflation, and think about where it's looking relative to the prior trend, it all kind of still makes sense. It's just that you had this period of deleveraging, again, after the pandemic first hit, and then a re-leveraging. So on a year-over-year basis, debt has increased by a lot. On a trend basis, especially accounting for income growth and inflation growth, it's well managed.
A lot of folks are also concerned about maybe the bifurcated consumer, those that own assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, doing fine, even benefiting from higher interest rates. Those that are not are really being hit by that inflation bug. How do you see that in your data?
So that's a narrative that I think is very important, right? We all tend as macroeconomists to look at the aggregate economy, and we can't do that. We definitely can't do that in this cycle because the inflation rates differ depending on your basket of spend, and the ability to navigate high inflation has also differed depending on how you participate in the economy across different sectors. So you certainly are in an environment where the past few years have been more difficult for the consumers that haven't been able to realize those wealth gains in the stock market. They're not invested, they're not homeowners. Maybe they've taken on debt and those interest rates have now increased. If their basket of spend has some of the categories that have seen the biggest price level shock, it's been more painful. It's harder to absorb that. So certainly, there's not one size fits all when it comes to this economy, and that's extremely important to keep in mind.
I want to fold in your world-class work, particularly in the consumer. I mean, she was like 21 years old. We're like, who is this person? Nailing it. 8 pages at Bank of America. We're like, who is this person? And I want to fold it back to Boston University economics, which is what I'm going to hear from a lot of people. They're going to go, she's wrong. The consumer's flat on their back. Is out of the pandemic, we had a stimulus which benefited financialized America. Those are the assets, those are the hope of assets, those of the haves benefited extraordinarily versus the have-nots flat on their back. Is that an accurate assessment?
I don't think that's an accurate assessment. I think that there's, as we talked before, there's not a uniform story, but I don't think you can just break it into those two categories. Because think about, again, go look at the labor market. Consider the fact that we've had job gains that have been impressive across many different categories, which span many different income levels. Right. Wage growth was actually the fastest coming out of the pandemic for the lower income, lower skilled part of the population, in a way that we hadn't seen in prior cycles. Right. And a lot of folks had really been supported by the fact that the stimulus was extremely beneficial and supportive at the beginning of the
you've been great
pandemic.
on this, and there's going to be a huge pushback. I can't tell you folks how an outlier view this is from Michelle Meyer. What I observe, granted I'm sitting in a rarefied part of America, is a lot of new cars, a lot of fancy cars. The stereotype now is somebody loaded up on NVIDIA and they bought a car. They sold the stock, bought a car. That's not true. What does MasterCard see about automobiles as an indicator of our GDP spirit forward?
I'll touch on that in a moment. Before that, I just want to go back to the point that you said around the outlier view. I think that this has been, I feel like I've been a broken record the past several years.
That's why you're not on. We heard it.
Because it's the same story where people want to make this case where something's going to go terribly wrong, where the consumer can't handle it. And the consumer has been able to handle it and has done so pretty remarkably. Again, with the U.S. consumer, I would argue driving some of the strength even abroad in terms of the experience economy
Paul,
and travel.
Get one more here. I mean, on a spur of the moment, somebody can have an extra gin and tonic and go out and buy a Vespa.
It's exact. And
that's,
So I did buy a Vespa over the weekend, and my kids rolled their collective eyes at this whole silliness. But
there you go.
What are people spending on their MasterCard? Is it experiences? Is it goods and products? What are they doing?
Yeah. Well, I won't be able. Vespa is a whole other category that I'll leave to you to talk through.
Thank you.
And your family. But certainly this idea of experiences driving the gains is spot on. We recently published a comprehensive report looking at the travel economy because we have the ability to see how people are spending cross-border, and it is fascinating. People, first of all, are out there traveling aggressively into the summer period. U.S. abroad is the big theme, in part because of the strength in the dollar. So you see a lot of Americans going and swiping and spending abroad, hotels, restaurants, mostly in those experience and recreation categories.
So what are they cutting back on? Because I know, for example, my house, we're
summer
getting ready
camps.
for a vacation.
No, they're cutting back on summer camps. Michelle Meyer has her kids going to 14 summer camps. You're only at 9, and what you two share, Lisa Mateo and Michelle Meyer, is you are baseball widows.
Yes.
I mean, you're out in the summer on the field, right, Michelle?
That is called dedicated parents, right? I spend so much time on the baseball field. I have a little league son who is committed to baseball, so we are committed parents that are out there rooting.
Can he help the Yankees right now?
Well, he's
bring him in.
He is at a Yankees summer camp right now, sponsored by
Very cool.
for baseball right now, so maybe.
Yeah.
It keeps you busy. It keeps you busy.
How old is he?
My older son is 11.
Oh, so Lisa, what is your advice with the grizzled high schooler doing this full time?
Stay away from club teams as long as you can because they will drain you.
Yes, I can imagine. The amount of gear alone, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it does speak to the fact that people love to have those experiences, those priceless experiences, whether you're on a baseball field or you're elsewhere.
Right.
They do want to spend to that, and they do want to have those moments. But to your point, Lisa, which is a really good one, if you're spending more on that travel and those experiences, and you're really targeted in terms of how you're using your purchasing power, what are you cutting back on? Right. Certainly, you're seeing a lot of deflation or disinflation in some of the everyday goods, and that is very clear in the CPI report. And we'll get another sense of that coming this week.
Don't be a stranger. We need a baseball update with the 11-year-old here in a couple weeks. Michelle Meyer of MasterCard, thank you so much. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Beryl has made landfall on the middle Texas coast near Matagorda with a dangerous storm surge and strong winds. The storm center hit land as a Category 1 hurricane early this morning. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has the latest.
Beryl is now still a hurricane, but just barely, with winds of 75 miles an hour. It is moving to the north at 10 miles an hour. It is due west of Galveston, Texas, also off to the west-southwest of the Houston area by about 40 miles. We expect it to continue to produce very heavy rain, particularly in the Houston and Galveston areas, and then through across eastern parts of Texas through the remainder of the morning and into the afternoon. Areas to the northwest of Bryant and College Station will see much lighter amounts. In fact, there may not be much rain out near Temple. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Radio.
Rob, thank you, sir. Officials in Ukraine say a major Russian missile attack has killed at least 28 people and injured almost 100 across the country. One missile struck a large children's hospital in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, and emergency crews searched the rubble for casualties. Several influential congressional Democrats said privately on Sunday that they want President Joe Biden to step aside as the party's White House nominee. The latest defections include several Democratic leaders of House committees. Meanwhile, Biden campaigned yesterday in Pennsylvania.
You know, I've been doing this a long time, and I, honest to God, have never been more optimistic about America's future if we stick together.
Biden spoke in Philadelphia. France is heading into an extended period of political gridlock after a shock defeat for Marine Le Pen's far right in Sunday's elections produced a divided parliament with no clear majority. A left-wing alliance will be the biggest group with 178 out of 577 seats in the lower house, but still way short of the 289 required for an absolute majority. President Emmanuel Macron's group was second, with Le Pen's National Rally trailing in third place. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. This is important. This is a whole set of people off the New York and London desk of J.P. Morgan, and I should say Indy as well. And it is released by Dubravko Lakos-Bujas. This is the gentleman in the reorg of J.P. Morgan Research who's basically taking over from the train wreck, which has been the market guess in the equity markets of a certain part of J.P. Morgan. Okay. Not the whole firm, but a certain mark. We're going to get to Dubravko in here as we can around the schedule. But this is the first publication. It's pretty agnostic. They don't come out with that S&P target and that, Paul, but nevertheless, it signals a sea change at the major bank to see him on the masthead coming out here with a global sense of where equity markets are heading.
They're out there with a 21-page deck kind of summarizing all of their, all of their strategic outlooks looking across the globe here. So interesting work from the folks at JP Morgan.
It's got to be a new look here. You know, there's got to be a sea change look from JP Morgan. We'll keep you abreast of that. We want to remind everyone that with a larger bank like this, there's any number of platforms as well. So it's a JP Morgan view from a certain part of JP Morgan, if you will. Green on the screen, small caps up 0.6%. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got NASDAQ futures up 12 points, Dow futures up 67 points, S&P futures up 4 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.62%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.28%, and that is little changed. We head over to currencies. We have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen weaker, 160.78 against the dollar. We have the euro stronger, British pound stronger. We have the euro at 108.42 against the dollar. Right now, we'll head to spot gold lower, $2,372 an ounce. Brent crude $86 a barrel. WTI crude $82 a barrel. Shares of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, they're higher, up about 3% after its price target was raised over at Morgan Stanley. We'll stick with tech. We'll check in with Intel shares. They're up 3%. And finally, battery maker LG Energy Solution reported second quarter profit missed estimates. Sales of electronic vehicles continue to slow. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. This is going to be a great 8 minutes. Stay with us, please, here. Amanda Rebello is going to join us. She's had the title's terrible. Would you tell him, get a new title?
I know some people DWS. I'll make a phone call.
Head of Passive Sales. What in God's name is Head of Passive Sales? Your research note is brilliant. I love it because it's like statement, action, here's what to do. And we're going to get to that in a minute. There's degrees in the world, folks, that really matter. And this really goes back ancient. And I'm not going to go into a history lesson on this. But mathematics at Oxford borders on religion. What was it like the first day you walked in for a graduate degree in mathematics at Oxford? What was the intimidation factor?
So actually it was an undergraduate degree to start off with, so I think even more naivety about what you're stepping into, but was a really fantastic opportunity. Thanks for asking. I think the maybe bad thing is that's my default or my, what I think of as university education, and I guess that it wasn't really normality. Very honored and privileged.
So all the parents out there with kids and daughters, and I get the whole STEM thing, and frankly, I look at foreign languages now as a STEM skill. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's something I've changed my mind on in recent years. How do we get the love of math into kids? Is it pencil and paper? What's the secret?
I think that one thing that's in the way in which maths is taught, and actually my sister is a high school teacher in the UK for mathematics, the issue is that it's very procedural. I think as well a lot of teachers don't have the passion, so we really need to get passionate people to teach. Yeah. I'm one of them. I sold out and I went into finance, right? So I think that's the issue.
Good way to start the interview. Yeah. Good morning to the General Counsel at DWS as we have a sold out Amanda with us. Your note is brilliant, and it's ETFs, and it's the to-do list in factors.
Yeah.
What is the to-do in factors? Don't tell me momentum.
Well, this is the thing. Everyone is so long momentum without even realizing it. I think, we see every day more progress in terms of the weight of the Mag 7 in the S&P 500. But if you think about it, it's not just for US investors. We also have most global investors. Their largest exposure is in US equities. And so everyone is very concentrated in the 7 names, or if you want to include the 8 names. Just looking at the S&P 500, we know it's 1% of the names. We know it's about 31% of the index weight, but not all of us know it's 46% of the volatility composition. So just thinking about that, and Tom, you're talking about history. If we try to be historians of the market, last time we've seen that kind of concentration, it was 2000 and also 1929 pre-Wall Street crash.
All right, I missed the first one. I was definitely there in the late 90s, contributing to that bubble. If I want to hedge my risk to those Magnificent 7, do you guys have some ETFs that'll do that for me?
Yeah, so we really like international markets at the moment.
Okay.
We're always big fans of the US, and you can still remain allocated to them, but we think that there are opportunities in international equities in Europe and in Japan. And then the other piece of that, everyone always says, oh, but Amanda, European equities don't perform, Japanese equities don't perform. It's because they've always experienced them being long that natural currency. And so to think about then hedging and being exposed back to dollar, so selling forward like the yen or the euro, for example, and then being long the dollar, that's the way that it can make sense. That also reduces your overall portfolio volatility as well, which I think, when we think about, from the DWS side, we've put a 30% probability to recession. We have to be even more cautious than we have been previously.
So you have, like, for example, these hedged equity ETFs. When you say it's hedged, is it hedged for currency?
Just for currency.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we do that on a monthly basis. We follow an indexed approach, which comes from MSCI, which is the index provider. And so basically you just look at the weight of the currencies in each of the baskets and then put forward the 1 month forwards on a rolling basis.
All right, I like this one. The Russell 1000 U.S. Quality at a Reasonable Price ETF.
Yes.
So what goes in there?
So that's quality and value. So we're looking at stocks which are in the Russell 1. And then FTSE Russell, they look at the factors to which all of those stocks are exposed. And basically, if you're exposed to quality and to value, then you end up including those in the basket. And then you actually kind of overweight based on the propensity to which it's strongly aligned with those factors.
With the ETF approach, is there a risk of over-diversification that when you find a winner, you don't own enough of it? Mm-hmm. And is there a risk of over-rebalancing, over-trading?
Yeah, so the first question, I think that's why we always encourage investors to do a full portfolio look through, because you might have the same stock but then different ETF exposures, for example, and that might end up meaning that then you're either too underweight or too overweight. But are people too diversified
now?
No, I think people aren't diversified enough at the moment. I think when we think about the S&P exposure, I think also when we think about different sectors as well. So everyone's very long tech, for example, but do we need to think about underweighting that? I think at the same time, though, there are definitely different investors, and it really depends on your time frame that you're looking at. If you do want to have a more higher octane exposure to tech, then why not be long S&P 500, but then go into specific sectors or even subsectors like semiconductors or cybersecurity, for example. That's another interesting theme that's coming up.
Well, here in the U.S., ESG has definitely taken a turn for the worse in terms of interest, I would say. Mm-hmm. Yet there's an S&P 500 ESG index, SNPE. Mm-hmm. It's up 35% since the October low. I was not expecting that. I was expecting a downward sloping line, and now I've got upwards and to the right. Talk to us about how you guys view ESG and maybe how your clients are viewing ESG these days.
It's really funny because we're having more conversations on it again, but not from the ESG lens, but from the alpha lens. And so a lot of people have seen this performance since October, but also since the inception of the product. It just launched, it launched 5 years ago, so we've just had the anniversary, and it's outperformed the S&P by about 2.5% annualized. So what's really interesting is that everyone was thinking that ESG, might deliver alpha in down markets. Basically, you have like a more conservative approach, and so you have a lower capture ratio on the downside, but it's actually proposed like a higher capture ratio on the upside as well.
I got to squeeze this in. You've been active personally in the Grenfell Tower tragedy. Terrible skyscraper fire with hundreds of people dying, and really, really difficult as well. John Byrne Murdoch had a chart this weekend in the FT. I was thunderstruck at what Mark Carney has told me before. It's London and it's everybody else in the United Kingdom. With all your wonderful experience, is it just, it's like Paris on steroids. It's the London economy and London real GDP versus everybody else flat on their back in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I think that London or the UK is very London-centric, absolutely.
More so?
I think it's actually ended up getting a little bit stronger, perhaps, since Brexit. So we see, a lot of contracts in industry, for example. Manchester, Birmingham were benefiting from these, but given that we do less trade now with the EU than we did previously, these kind of industrial centres, maybe there's less scope there.
Don't be a stranger. Amanda Rabello with DW asked, YouTube, and the chat lights up with her work at Oxford and on STEM education of our children as well. Terry Haines in the 9 o'clock hour. There is London, there's Paris, and then there's the political turmoil that we're living in the United States. CSNY.
We'll finally
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo are going to rip up the script just in what all of America's worried about. Futures up 5. Lori Calvasina to be with us in a moment. This is some QR code generator. I have no idea who they are. Thank you so much for sending us to us. In 8th place, New York, New York. Average monthly rent, make it $3,800. Are you ready for this? 68% of your monthly disposable income for rent. That, according to QR code generator. Lisa, it's nuts.
Wow. I mean, all your money. That's where it's going to.
Yeah,
I mean, but then you have to cut back on different. Where do you cut back?
And the thing about
what
the
do you
rents,
cut back on?
Right.
What do you cut back on? Breakfast.
The thing about the rents in New York City is they're all, or most of them, are 1-year lease. So the kids are perpetually in a looking for an apartment mode. My day, we had 2- and 3-year leases were standard. Now the kids are always looking for the next apartment and the next roommate because the owner knows that when this 1-year lease is up, they can lift rates exponentially, 15, 20, 30%.
Bridgeport, Connecticut, expensive. What a shock. L.A., Los Angeles, California, number 2.
I have an offspring there, too.
In the slot. Thank you for that report. We say good morning here. What a wonderful conversation this hour. Terry Haines to join us, Lori Calvasina. In a moment, green on the screen here. The 10-year real yield I noticed earlier, I've lost 2.02%, I think, on the 10-year real yield. There it is. I stand corrected. 2.01%. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a lift to the market. This after last week's rally on Wall Street. In fact, the S&P 500 had its biggest weekly advance since April. We'll check in with S&P futures right now. Up about 5 points. Dow futures up 89 points. NASDAQ futures up about 7 points. We have the 2-year yield 4.62%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that is little changed right now. European stocks edging higher after a French election result that really kept the far right at bay. So you have the CAC in Paris up about 0.1%. The Stock 600 up about 0.4%. Shares of Paramount higher, up more than 1% right now. This is after it agreed to merge with Skydance. And then you have Boeing. It's agreed to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy. That's in connection with 2 fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jetliner. Those shares up nearly 1%. And Nvidia up about 1%. UBS raised its price target on the company. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Amanda Rebello, she brought in like an entourage.
I know.
I mean, like interns from DWS and the whole thing.
Yep. They're enjoying their time here at Bloomberg.
They're like,
I tell you, Bloomberg's an experience coming here. Come check it out.
They're doing all they can. We are at 59th Street in Lexington, across from Bloomingdale's. It's the only reason Lori Calvasina comes on.
Exactly.
She goes over there. You ever see it? I'm sure, Lisa, you've never seen it. You go into Bloomingdale's, a claim store, movies, Robin Williams, and they have a gauntlet from door to door on the first floor, the entry floor of bags.
Oh, yeah.
It's the bag disaster. Mrs. Keene has never gotten through the gauntlet.
No.
Without,
understandable.
It is like the worst, what is it, like 100 yards, 50 yards in America. Joining us now, Lori Calvasina with RBC Capital Markets. Lori, what is the character of this bull market?
Oh, I think that's a great question, Tom. There have been, I think a lot of characterizations. I think it's been a misunderstood bull market. And I think it goes back to the fact that there's been a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of confusion about what we went through back in 2022. And my view, for some time now has been that it was a recession near miss. I've characterized it as a cousin of the recession. And, we basically, it felt like a recession on various sentiment gauges. We didn't technically have one, though we did have negative GDP, but the labor market was fine. It was very, very close. And I think a lot of the behavior we've seen since then is characteristic of a recession type recovery trade. So where does that leave us where we are now? In my mind, this is really kind of starting to feel more, kind of mid-cycle, like the bull bull is tired, the bull is stumbling a little bit. And that's very natural. I don't think there's necessarily a recession around the corner. I think that we've just had a quick and fast recovery, and we need to catch our breath in here.
Hey, Lori, I know you recently raised your year-end 24 S&P 500 price target to 5,700 from 5,300, which you characterized as a nervous raise. Why is it a nervous raise?
Well, it's, I've been described as sort of aggressively neutral recently. I've talked about myself as a tired bull, and I
No,
figured I'd just go ahead and tell
whoa,
people
whoa, whoa,
how I feel.
Whoa, so Lori, please, you're aggressively neutral. Are we talking as a strategist or as a parent?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if we want to get into the parental stuff these days. I don't think you have enough time on the podcast for that. But I remember I had the little ones at home. But the reality is, we sort of trued up our models for mid-year. We changed a lot of our back tests from 12-month forward to 6-month forward, or looking at the second half of a year as opposed to a full year. We just really tried to kind of clean things up analytically, just given that we're at the midpoint of the year, not back in January. And we found that, the median outcome on our 5 different models was a little over 5,700. Not too far from where we are right now. It was about 4% from when we published the target, through the new year-end number. And we looked at it and we said, look, we kind of still feel like there's a little bit more room to go in here. One of our sentiment models, I keep thinking it's going to top out every Thursday when the data comes, and it hasn't. But we're close. And so we said, personally, I feel like a nervous and jumpy bull in here. I see a little bit more room to go. I do think that we're going to hit a big pothole at some point. Now, by big, I mean 5 to 10% drawdown, kind of maybe a little bit worse than what we got in April, but not too much worse. And we're all New Yorkers, right? We drive through big, massive potholes that are jarring and feel horrible all the time, and you keep going. I'm thinking the FDR, the recent experience I had there. But that's really kind of how I feel. I think we're going to hit some potholes. I think we've got to power through. Nervously, I think there's the case for some upside next year, but I do think there's a lot of fog in the outlook, frankly, for next year.
And Lori, I noticed you did not publish a 2025 S&P target. Why not?
It's just too early. What we did is something we did last year, which was we just published the outcome of all our models, assuming that either our new 2024 target was the starting point or the mid-year of 2024. And so we really just tried to put the data out there so we can have the conversations and say, this is what these models are showing. That median forecast comes to around 61.59. But I'll tell you, I'm making one big leap in the GDP assumption. So right now, consensus is calling for 1.8 next year. That's in the middle of kind of a negative range. 0 to 2% is economic purgatory. Stocks don't like that. They typically go down in that kind of range. But the Fed SEP is more like 2%, and the consensus is edging up, and the consumer's been chronically underestimated in this recovery. So we said, okay, we're just going to go ahead and pencil in that 2 to 4 range, and that can give us an optimistic scenario. I don't have 100% confidence in that assumption right now. We wanted to be intellectually honest with people.
Lori, this is important. You have said, this is really important, folks, from a pro standpoint. You've taken in your vision from a 12-month look forward to a 6-month look forward. We're going into earnings season. Forget about big tech. Forget about big banks. You're expert at every other stock out there. Do you now have to put greater weight on quarter-to-quarter cash flow earnings and revenue reports versus guesstimating a terminal value out 5 years or 7 years, because you can't even get out to 12 months on your macro view?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that the reality is that if you look at it from an earnings perspective, we just all need to be realistic in here. Companies have been doing the last few years a magnificent job of meeting or beating consensus expectations. And what we've seen in the post-GFC environment is that when you get to the middle point of the year, the consensus numbers on bottom-up earnings expectations basically end up being in the right neighborhood. Of course, there's a company that misses here or there or positively surprises. But in general, the bottom-up consensus is right around the kind of June, July timeframe. So you kind of need to stop fighting that. Would be my view. I also think we just process information differently, more quickly. We're all looking at these real-time, high-frequency daily and weekly indicators. That's really something that we saw emerge in the COVID era. that's fundamentally changed investing. And so I do think things that get priced in much more quickly, and there's less of an information edge, frankly, if you're thinking out longer term.
Lord Calvasina, thank you so much. RBC Capital Markets. So Paul, that's like you own NVIDIA large, you got a 501k, so you just went out and popped the Vespa this weekend.
Yeah, total midlife crisis type thing.
It was an all-cash transaction.
All-cash transaction, just threw it down there. And the folks at Monmouth Vespa took care of me. All good.
You should have heard All-Cash Transaction. That was such a good band years ago. They played Mitch Ryder in the Detroit Wheels like nobody.
Really? Okay.
They were good. They opened for, I think they opened for Sugarloaf. I can't remember. Futures up 7. The market's not open yet. I thought the market was open. There's so much going on.
Lisa's taking her time.
Well, yeah, it's the futures up 7. The VIX 12.59. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Joe Biden will shift this week from focusing on campaigning for re-election to hosting a NATO summit. European leaders gather in Washington starting tomorrow to celebrate the alliance's 75th anniversary. Meanwhile, Congress is also heading back into session as Democratic lawmakers discuss concerns about Biden's ability to stay in the presidential race. Several influential congressional Democrats said privately yesterday that they want Biden to step aside as the party's White House nominee. More with Bloomberg's Gregory Cordy.
The names that jumped out to me were Jerry Nadler of New York and Adam Smith of Washington. These are Democrats who chair committees and prominent committees in the House when the Democrats are in power. And so, those are it's sort of a drip, drip, drip for Joe Biden of every day a few more Democrats. It's by no means the majority of his party. But it's got to be concerning as the president heads into his convention next month, trying to unite the party around him.
Bloomberg's Gregory Cordy. This comes as a Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll shows Biden narrowing the gap with Trump in swing states. In France, a surprise win by a left-wing coalition in Sunday's legislative election offered no party a path to claim the majority needed to govern. The new Popular Front won 178 seats in the National Assembly. Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally came in third. Hundreds of thousands are without power in Texas this morning. Beryl began to gather power from the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It finally made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane early this morning near Matagorda Bay, Texas, with winds of 80 miles per hour. Matagorda County Public Information Officer Mitch Thames.
We've got substantial flooding along the Gulf Coast as we expected with the tide.
Matagorda County Public Information Officer Mitch Thames. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much. Paul, we talked about this in the 7 hour. I guess we got to bring it up again. Done deal on Paramount?
I think so.
We think so.
I think so. And this is the deal that Sherry Redstone, the control shareholder of Paramount, wanted. Right. It's what she gets. The non-controlling shareholders will get,
right.
Questionable if it's a fair price.
What do the employees of CBS get, like Margaret Brennan?
They get to get their checks continue to be, viable here. So they have a new owner. Let's see what this new owner has in terms of vision here. It is a business that's facing really tough headwinds.
What's his timeline? Does he have to go like in days and weeks?
Yes, he does. He has a very inflated balance sheet, lots of debt on this balance sheet. So you have to keep focused on that. And they have to really accelerate the transition to streaming, whether that's merging their streaming business with another streamer. I don't know.
Yeah. To me, it's there's 6, 7, 8 of them, and that's all going to change. We'll continue to cover that. And again, Lucas Shaw, industry leading, a terrific newsletter from Bloomberg. Lucas Shaw, subscribe. Futures up 6, NASDAQ up a fractional. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a busy week on the economic calendar. In case you're keeping score, here you go. So the Fed Chair Jay Powell's testimony on Tuesday and Wednesday. That's going to be closely watched ahead of Thursday's consumer price figures for June. Friday, we go on to Producer Price Index. We got earnings from major U.S. banks, including JP Morgan Chase, also out this week, so keep an eye out for that. Ahead of all this, we have NASDAQ futures up about 15 points, Dow futures up 77 points, S&P futures up 6. We have the 2-year yield at 4.61%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.27%, and that is little changed. We have commodities, oil edging lower after 4 straight weekly gains. We have Brent crude at $85 a barrel, WTI crude at $82 a barrel. What's moving the markets? Shares of Corning up 6%, reported preliminary core sales, a second quarter that beat estimates. And then a few deal-making news. Eli Lilly agreed to buy biopharmaceutical company Morphic Holding. We have Morphic Holding up more than 75% right now. You have Eli Lilly up about 0.5%. And Carlsberg buying UK Pepsi bottler Britvic, $4.2 billion. Carlsberg right now up more than 4% in Copenhagen. We have Britvic up more than 4% in London. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thank you so much. Okay, what we're going to do here, folks, is try to have, I've been watching in our studios here, our interactive broker studios, we have all the different networks lined up, Le Monde English and France 24, and I saw somebody say, I think it was out on Fox, obviously, a little bit negative to the president. OMG, he uses large font. Folks, I use large font. They had to tell the interns, he can't read it, use large font. And I bring this back to a spectacular essay in the New York Times by someone who's actually an expert on old people, Rachel Bedard, out of Brown University. And she wrote this great essay on this word frailty and what it means. And it goes on an arch basis back to Columbia University and Linda Fried, who basically invented geriatric frailty analysis. Joining us now, a young buck, Terry Haines with Pangaea Policy. I'm sorry, Terry, it really hit home. And I'm not frail, but there you are. What is the frailty measurement of this president this morning?
I'm on the large font club myself, Tom. So thank you all. Thank you all for gathering this morning. The frailty quotient is, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but you can be frail and with it. By public view, he goes up and down. So, here we are, but he still knows how to give the middle finger to people. And he did that with some force on Friday night because he gave the middle finger to the Democratic donor class and a lot of the political class that all of a sudden decided he's not up to it.
Well, jump in here, Paul. I'm rattled by Rachel Bedard's wonderful essay.
So, Terry, I think if you were to ask John Q., Democrat out on the street, who he or she wants to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, they would probably respond, whoever can beat former President Trump, the Republican nominee. Do we have any idea who that is today?
Well, based on Bloomberg Morning Consult polling, it's Biden. Biden's right in there. With an electoral college tally that is basically even with 77 unknown votes in the middle, and he's right there and able to right the ship. So this whole business that Biden's going to tank was wrong. The whole business that Trump's going to take votes from Biden is wrong, and that's really wrong. We've talked about that. I mean, whoever tentative Biden voters are, they don't want to go to Trump. And you're in a situation now where apparently the wheels aren't falling off, and I imagine that's part of the president's calculations too in that middle finger Friday night.
Well, the president is out with a letter just this morning addressed to Democratic lawmakers and released by his campaign. Bloomberg News is reporting, and it's, quote, "I am firmly committed to staying in this race, to running this race to the end, and to beating Donald Trump," end quote. So there, I guess that says it all there. Terry, is that kind of where we leave it at this point?
Well, I find it interesting that everybody wants to give the smoke and mirrors on the political and donor side all the credence in the world, and Biden none of the credence. And Biden was, I thought, very direct on Friday night, regardless of what you think about the directness or how whether it's advisable or not. I mean, that's where it is. And unless there's another glitch of the kind that existed in that debate, he's going to stay in, and that's what he said.
Terry, Nick Thompson at The Atlantic had a brilliant observation. I'm going to paraphrase it here. I want to be very careful how I do this. He said, we've become parties, plural, but in the Democratic Party of an anointment by an inside group. You know, Clinton's plural, Obama's plural, et cetera, the Bushes on the other side, maybe Mr. Trump, et cetera. How do we get back to our Ute, where they actually, really had a debate with delegates involved? Do we get back to that, or is it just gone?
It can come back pretty easily, actually. You only need one rule change, and that's the rule change that since 1972 for Democrats, 1976 for Republicans, requires the delegate vote to be an assignment to be binding on the first ballot. You take that away and you get the old style conventions where people assemble and all of a sudden figure out, you know what, I don't like any of these people. We want to do something else. And that used to happen a lot. It can happen again. Might even happen this summer yet.
So I guess that goes to the next question, Terry. Should Tom and I be paying attention to these conventions this summer?
Sure, absolutely. Right now, I don't think right now, Trump's going to be the nominee on the Republican side. Right now, Biden's going to be the nominee on the Democratic side because nobody can tell him no, apparently. You've got the political class on the other side saying, well, he's got to make a decision by this Friday. Like, let's think about that. This Friday is just after the NATO summit and just before the Republican convention. So the look you want, Democrats and the press, is you want Biden to capitulate to Trump on the eve of Trump's convention. That's what you want? Right. Biden's not going to do that.
Terry,
they're stuck.
Because of time, Terry, I got to squeeze this in. You led with a single sentence that I've heard many others say now, that all that matters is the polls. When do we see polls besides the Bloomberg poll that was out? When do we see polls that quantifies pro-Biden, anti-Biden, for that matter, pro-Trump, anti-Trump?
I think you see them trickle in later this week, and there's probably another big tranche coming just before the Republican convention. I would urge you all to pay attention to only two things: what's actually going on in the swing states and whether they are registered voter or likely voter polls. Likely voter polls are what matters, and registered voter polls are pretty much all you're getting right now.
This has been brilliant. Terry Haines, as always, thank you so much. With Pangaea Policy, we make jokes about it, and Terry's been, so kind to be with us often. But actually, the truth is, folks, he won't send us donuts. Anybody who sends us donuts goes to the
we'll put them on.
top of the pile.
Exactly.
We'll put them on as much as we can. But
I think we'll be talking a lot to him over the next several weeks.
The wisdom that he had in the uproar after the debate, about would everybody just wait for the polls?
Right.
I mean, that's what a pro says versus all the back and forth and the inflammatory stuff. What color Vespa did you get?
It's kind of a grayish with a nice brown leather seat. Looks pretty sporty.
What's it called?
It's a Vespa Piaggio.
Piaggio.
Yeah.
And it's got little turn signals and all?
Sure. It got a little horn. Beep, beep. Yep.
Does your helmet match?
The helmet is a Vespa helmet, so I feel pretty safe.
So you went for this is like a midlife thing, right?
Totally.
Is that right? You didn't go for the Harley though.
I've been looking at a Vespa, yearning for a Vespa since I was like 14 or 15.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
And I just.
But you're smarter than me. You got it.
Yeah.
You just got it.
Exactly. You just got to run out and do it. Why not?
How does it break?
Great. Everything's just perfect. Looks solid. Rides feels good. I'm all good. I'm just cruising up and down the Jersey Shore. How about that?
That's the way to do it, though.
Yeah, exactly. But that is a visual for everybody out there. It was hot out this weekend too, so it was fun.
Ken, what do you think? Nice. I mean, our global technical director is going,
like
Tom, don't do this. Ken, you see me down Fifth Avenue going to work
exactly.
with a Vesta, suit and tie.
Exactly.
Works out,
Cruising
right?
through Central Park. There you go.
You see? I go down the bike lane in Central Park.
Yep.
Paul Sweeney keeping the American consumption model moving forward. Markets do better. Futures have baked the VIX 12.60. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. We've got a lot in focus this week. Inflation figures, comments from Fed Chair Jay Powell, bank earnings. How are the markets going to react to this? Ahead of all that, well, we're coming off last week's rally on Wall Street where the S&P 500 had its biggest weekly advance since April. Let's check in with it right now. S&P 500, little change, up about 4 points at 5,572. The Dow up about 0.2%, 92 points at 39,465. And with the NASDAQ up about 0.1%, 21 points at 18,370. We head over to the two-year yield at 4.62%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. 0.8%, and that is little change. We'll check in with currencies. The dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger at 160.71 against the dollar. We have the euro. That is stronger at 108.45 against the dollar, and the British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down slightly at 57,000, just around there. At the opening, also checking in with Paramount, their shares down 1%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene now their equity interview of the day. Everybody leaning on what Brian Belski says. He's one of the pinatas on the street. He's been a bull. He's been correct. The Bears hate him. He joins us here from BMO Capital Markets. We were talking about Michael Mauboussin, and you were way out front of this. I think it was in his youth. He was at OPCO. He was still getting carded in bars downtown. Brian, I want to just talk about capital efficiency and that Graham, Dodd, and Coddle doesn't work in our analysis now. What are we missing about the capital allocation, capital efficiency of these technology stocks?
Well, thanks for asking. Thank you so much for having us, too. I mean, I think that so many investors, meaning analysts or hedge funds or whatever, have gotten away from looking at balance sheets and cash flow and everything. They don't even know what capital allocation is. And these companies have become so massively efficient, Tom. And I think that really began actually 22 years ago this month. If you remember, we were still trying to buy the dip in 2001, 2002. And I remember John Chambers coming out and talking about second quarter earnings for Cisco, and he said, we have no forecast. And the market was down. I
remember this crystal clear.
I was at a meeting. I was a strategist at Piper Jaffray at the time, and I was having a meeting at Morgan Stanley when they moved up in the McGraw-Hill building. And I remember that day in particular, and that was the bottom in the tech sector. And then from that place, that time frame, tech stocks had a massive secular change in terms of how they managed their capital, how they looked at cash flow. And I think the key thing with that is that through the cash flow and then filtering into the income statement, how their earnings actually became massively discernible and steady. That was the key thing.
Paul, you lived this as well. I mean, the three of us lived this. Lisa she was in fourth grade or something like that. But Paul, what's so important here is when I say these companies are running like 19th century merchant banks in Hong Kong, they're running for profit, not the normal securities analysis we grew up with.
So, Brian, but there is the risk here of concentration here. How do you get comfortable with this concentration risk in the S&P 500?
We've done a lot of the concentration work in the past, and people just kind of poo-pooed it. We've shown that markets can do well out of this super concentration. We are worried, quite frankly, on a near-term basis, Paul, that the market has gotten a little ahead of itself. I think that's pretty clear, and we have not had a correction more than 3%. And we need, in the second year of this cyclical bull market, remember, our call has been resolute since 2010 that stocks entered a secular bull market. U.S. stocks entered a secular bull market in 2009. So we've got about another 10 years to go if you want to do the quick math. But we need on average, we see a 9.4% correction in the second year of a bull market. So we think that we can see a correction, and that'll be your next great entry point. And oh, by the way, from a sentiment perspective, everybody and their mother, brother, sister, cousin, uncle is bullish. Everybody. And the bears are getting kicked down to the ground, and that's okay, by the way. Remember, bulls making money, bears are really smart. But at the end of the day, we need a bit of a refresh, and I think that's your next great buying opportunity in this next big secular market.
All right, you are at the Bank of Montreal. Let's throw a bone to our friends up in Canada. Opportunities in Canadian equities.
Oh my gosh. I think, I've been at BMO now 12 and a half years, and what I've learned is it's a great stock picking market. But I've learned also that it's a massively contrarian market. When everybody's talking about one thing, go the other way. So everybody hates TD in Canada. That's my pick to click. I mean, TD to 2024 in Canada is what Citigroup was to America in 2023. Everybody hated Citigroup, remember, a year ago when they were cutting costs. I think TD is a great place to be from a contrarian perspective. I think from a stock picking perspective too, Paul, is that you want to look at the Canadian consumer and stocks like Aritzia and Couche-Tard, which is Circle K, if you know that brand. Very, very strong names. And Dollarama for that matter. So the Canadian consumer names look really, really interesting to us from a longer term side.
So does that mean the Canadian consumer is in pretty good shape?
Well, our work shows that
they have big home ownership issues.
Big home ownership issues, big debt issues. But what our work shows from a backtesting perspective is that the Canadian consumer does very well if the market thinks they're heading into a recession. Now, the Bank of Canada is probably going to cut again. So the Bank of Canada thinks that Canada is going into maybe a little bit of a recession. That's when you want to buy consumer discretionary.
You got an election in the way as well. Brian Belski, you mentioned being contrarian, looking at consensus. Right now, the hedge fund zeitgeist is to be out of tech, more towards energy and materials. How do you interpret that?
Well, technically, from our U.S. Strategy perspective, we're underweight both materials and energy. Here's why. When inflation's going down, the commodity price goes down, and that means the underlying fundamentals are going to be going down in energy and materials. If you take a look at other areas of the world, there's other places to buy energy and materials, especially Canada relative to the U.S. And so while we own Freeport-McMoRan and we own Chevron and Exxon and Chesapeake and certain equity portfolios, we're not going to be overweight the sector anytime soon.
What are you doing with the glory stocks at the moment? Like, if you want to talk individual stocks, great.
Sure.
But as a general statement, what are you doing with those stocks as you listen to their earnings?
The Glory 7, I think we should come up with the Glory stocks. I call them the Super 7. I think the Super 7 could be your kind of consumer staples. They'll be your core holdings. And I think, who would have ever thought that a trade down into a $500 or $800 billion company like Oracle is a trade down? I mean, how pathetic is that?
So retail is saying these are conservative stocks, and hedge funds are saying they're a volatility of a certain persuasion.
They are, and think about this. Bill O'Neill, which I learned in the business from a long time ago, when Lisa was in first grade or something like that. Let's just be clear on that. But he said that the institutional money is the smart money and retail is the dumb money. It's the exact opposite now. So institutional is all about what you did for me yesterday. Retail and private wealth is all about longer term. So private wealth, we think, is very well positioned.
All right, so we're going to have earnings starting actually Thursday. Some of the airlines come out, and then Friday, J.P. Morgan, some of the other big banks. What are you looking for? What do you think this market has to see in this earnings cycle?
Well, we've said that we could see a 1996 type event. 1996, Micron missed earnings. And if you remember back the second half of 95, the last quarter of 95 into 96, that's when the kind of tech got going. And it was earnings and fundamentally driven. Then it was momentum and dot-com driven. And that caused a pretty decent correction in the summer of 96. I think that could happen again. Now, a lot of people are giving me crap about looking at earnings so closely, but these stocks are priced to perfection. It's going to be more about what they're going to say going forward into 2025 and 2026 in terms of their growth rates. So I think we could see a bit of a correction there. But listen, I think earnings on the financial side are understated. I think healthcare earnings are understated. So we could see a kick there. I think financials, with respect to return on equity, is way understated as well. And I think you're going to see a surprise up there, especially in wealth management and the capital market.
What's a Belski correction look like? I mean, in this world, a pullback, 3%. Baloney, a correction's 10%, right?
Yeah, we need a healthy type thing that will scare people. I think anything over 5 to 6 will start to scare people. And then you'll have a little bit of capitulation, let's call it, in this type of bull market.
Some sweat, 2 p.m.
Let's
in the
sweat,
afternoon.
let's feel some pain.
VIX goes out to 25 or 30. The good old days.
The good old days. We don't want people to lose money, let's be clear. We don't like it when people lose money, but we do like it when we see a little bit of air come out of this. And that's, I think, that needs to happen.
Single best idea, stock, go.
Netflix.
Yeah,
so think about this, what's happening at Paramount.
Wow.
Think about this. So our theme for communication services is cash, content, and consolidation. It has been all year. We were overweight last year, neutral this year, because we thought there was going to be some consternation. Netflix is the Kleenex of streaming. It's the clear winner. It's the clear winner, and we think it's going to continue to win while all these others try to combine to take it on.
I mean, Paramount, just the opposite side of that trade, they get taken out today, arguably
down now.
Down, almost, about 0.75%. So go figure.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Bob.
The American consumer is super smart, though. They know the product that Paramount is offering, what they're going to be streaming. Just like on a retail side, they're super smart. They're going to go to Costco and Walmart all the time to get their stuff, but they're also going to go to like Lulu to get their specialized stuff.
That's Lisa. I can understand that. Brian, we got a couple of minutes left with you. We've extended this interview because, frankly, it's important. And Brian, I want you to talk about the job now where cab drivers don't have an S&P on their lap or a value line next to them looking at individual stocks. How has your world changed when everybody's in ETFs and index funds with an R squared of 0.98? It's a different world.
It's
now.
a different world. Like when I used to come to New York, you'd ask when the cab drivers and the Uber drivers were talking about stocks, you knew it was the end. And now you have to kind of pull it out of them a little bit. It's more about when you're in stores and you're talking, or in restaurants and you're talking about how business is. You have to kind of do that bottoms up. But my biggest problem with the people that do what I do, and let's face it, it's a really, really tough job. Too many strategists and economists are worried about the market levels. They're forgetting that the stock market is a market of stocks. And I think that's where most of them have been wrong in terms of their market targets.
Let's talk market targets. You got SPX, I think, at 5,600. You guys were one of the first on the street to raise your targets. You initiated a 5,500 bull case back in November of 23.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're darn close to 5,600. Now where do we go?
Well, let's call it a day. The market's over. It's the end of the year. Listen, I think I still think we're going to get a better buying opportunity. What's really cool about corrections are, and especially in these big bull markets where fundamentals actually are leading, everybody keeps talking about momentum, but on average, you get like a 15% rally once we make a higher low, right? And so it depends upon where we kind of see the market going down in this correction. Tom asked a great question. What does a correction look like to us? We would love to see a 10% correction. Are we going to get there? I don't know. If we see an 8% correction, we're going to see a 12% correction, because we're going to not see 10 exactly. So, we think that there's a likelihood of 5,600 is probably too low. We'll see if we have to adapt that, but we're very comfortable with where we are right now.
Brian Belski, thank you so much. The BMO Capital Markets there in equities. I can't say enough about the acuity of his research notes, plural. We protect the copyright of all of our guests. Get that from BMO Capital Markets. He's got 4. They send like 8 notes or whatever.
Yeah.
He's got some intern way over, way too much energy. His
old
old assistant sent like half a note. Yeah, he'll be in. He's looking at Netflix. That used to be the note you got from Belski. And now he's got
intern. Has been a heck of a run.
It's like he's got. How many interns do you have? 3?
Interns? I have no interns.
You have no interns?
Listen, I've got one associate for 4
Ian
senior analysts.
Ian Lincoln has like 5 interns. What's the difference?
It's all about efficiency at BMO, man. We're efficiency ratio, man. 8th largest bank in North America, 4th largest bank in commercial, 4th largest commercial bank in the United States. That's your.
Are you and Ian Lincoln on speaking terms?
What's that? Oh yes, of course we are.
What if we get a 375, 380 Ian Lincoln yield? What does that do to your world?
Nothing. Nothing, because I think we're 350 to 450 for a while, and that's the normalization. This is really good. A 375 forward, we'll take it.
Brian Belski, thank you so much.
Right.
With BMO Capital Markets. Ian, it's really quite a tag team pair, Mr. Belski and Mr. Lincoln as well. We're trading Dow up 200 points. It's a nice lift on a Monday morning. That level, 39,600 on the Dow. A little red on the screen, fractional on the NASDAQ 100. Apple went up to a new high here and it's pulled back a little bit. It's an old high, but that's where we are in this morning. In the yield space, the Sweeney yield higher, 4.63% on the 2-year yield, 10-year 4.30%, and the 10-year real yield 2.02. That was at a 2.00 in the French uproar this morning.
Yeah, we got some military folks walking
We
through
do.
here.
It's an annual visit. Yeah,
what's going on?
They're good.
They're coming for Lisa.
You ask him a question, and I've done panels with him, and you ask them a question, and they answer it in like 3 seconds. I'm like, come on, it's radio, it's TV. You got to talk longer, and they're hardwired not to talk longer. Good morning to the military. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks kicking off the week at all-time highs. Traders just awaiting a few things. The start of the corporate earnings season, inflation data for any clues on the Fed's next steps. They're also keeping a close eye on the U.S. presidential race. Or right now we have the NASDAQ up about 0.1%, 17 points at 18,370. The Dow up 0.6%, 235 points at 39,610. The S&P 500 up 0.2%, 12 points at 5,579. We have the two-year yield at 4.62%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. We have commodities, oil edging lower after 4 straight weekly declines. Right now we have crude oil at $85 a barrel, WTI crude at $82 a barrel. Companies making news. We'll check in with shares of Boeing. It's going to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy and face a criminal fine. Their shares up about 2%. Then we have shares of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. They're higher, up nearly 4%. And this is after its price target was raised over at Morgan Stanley. And finally, shares of Morphic Holdings soaring right now, up 75%. This is after Eli Lilly said they're going to agree to buy the company for $57 per share in cash. Lilly shares up about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Todd and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And right now, joining us, Luis Costa, with his Global Head of Emerging Markets FX at Citigroup as well. Luis, this is developed market, but I'm going to go there because I guess it's an emerging market after that election. Why did the euro not move off of the shock of the French election?
Because we were already pricing in something not ultra dissimilar here in terms of ultimate impact, right? I mean, after the first round, markets upgraded significantly the chance of a hung parliament, which is exactly what we have now, even though we know that Le Pen's coalition, the right wing, we were expecting a much better performance, tactical vote, push them down to third place. But effectively, the destination here is a destination of hung parliament, which was already kind of priced in by the market. So yeah, unchanged euros, and even the performance in OAT spreads has been, quite neutral compared to where we were before the second round.
Hey, Luis, given the political backstop we have here, we have the elections in the UK, the elections in France. At some point, we'll have our elections here in November here in the US. How does that play into your clients, your conversations you have with your emerging market clients these days?
They are dazed and confused. and the way we are trying to dissect that, we try to dissect in two tales, right? Especially when it comes to U.S. elections, right? I mean, it's a story that is now maybe dominated by Fed, which is, as we know, we are trading EM, currencies or rates or external bonds. The beginning of a Fed easing is super important, historically important for the EM. Is not going to be different this time around. So that, in a way, changes this dominance of elections. But we do believe that this is going to change quite fast as we go into September, October. So for now, it tends to be still positive for the EM as an asset class, for the EM risk, but things can change quite a lot if the U.S. curve starts steepening on the back of, a recalc of what fiscal will be after Trump.
So, Luis, as it relates to EM sovereign debt here, if I want to go buy some debt of Mexico or Brazil or something else, do I need to have a strong call on the U.S. Federal Reserve?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thankfully, what we had over the past, 4 or 5 weeks, I mean, data is finally coming the way, right, of potential September cut. So we do believe that September is happening. We do believe that overall this year we might get 50 basis points more to go, and that tends to be very supportive. But the problem is, it's the first innings of a Fed cycle. They tend to be very positive, but after that, there will be the dominance of other aspects. And it can be, back end of the U.S. curve that can come under pressure.
Luis, in the old days, you picked a country, you either bought their telephone company or their concrete company. It was just that sophisticated. Yep, that's right. And now it's a lot more sophisticated, and we can proxy through ETFs. Now, if I look off the great WEI screen on the Bloomberg, I've got Asia, Asia Pacific, etc. And I got a nice cross-section of returns, mostly sort of moldy in US dollar. Karachi of Pakistan does better than good. But what's the ETF of EM right now that makes sense?
Well, I mean, ETFs tend to be dominant in terms of flows in the sub-asset class of hard currency bonds. So for EM sovereign dollar-denominated debt, ETF flows tend to be quite a lot more dominant. When it comes to EM local currency debt, it's not the same. So I mean, it's still like the funds from the mutual fund industry, the traditional funds, they dominate the flow. So if a client is looking for ETFs and to participate in the rally or in the sell-off, and maybe he wants to go short, the story is a lot more concentrated on the hard currency side.
Hey, Luis, what's the city call on China here as it relates to sovereign debt strategy here? I mean, what do you do with China these days?
We believe it is still a catalyst of downside growth, especially when it comes to European manufacturing. Whatever influence China growth has, we know that the anatomy of China growth is changing, but we still believe that even though we've gone through a little bit of a carnival, expecting animal spirits out of China equities, we know that a lot of this story has deflated over the past month and a half, and the story remains a story of an economy that will be flirting with disinflation, an economy that has struggled quite a lot to engineer a big rebound in domestic consumption, and that all we know that bodes quite poorly to Europe.
Do you have a single best buy country right now? Is there one country where in the equity space you think there's a reasonableness out 3 years?
We are not on the equity space, but obviously I do believe that fundamentals wise, Turkey is still a very interesting place to be in terms of general assets, right? Turkish lira denominated assets. I'm not necessarily making a call on the equity space because I'm not an equity strategist, but I do think that there's a story of a rebalancing of current account. There's a story of comeback of capital, of international capital, both on marketable and non-marketable securities. So I think this is a very interesting story that might take us into 2025 as well.
We've got to get you back on just on that, just to focus on what Mr. Erdogan is going to do in Turkey as well. Luis Costa, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. What an interesting Monday. He's, of course, with Citigroup, I should say.
Yep.
What an interesting Monday.
Yeah, again, the elections we're dealing with, just trying to get a little bit of sense what's happening in Europe from a political perspective. And we're going to have earnings kicking off later this week, the airlines and then the banks. And so we're back into that cycle. And then we're going to ship Michael McKee off to Jackson Hole at some point next month.
That's like 3 tours.
Okay.
It's like a whole summit. Joining us now, surveillance congestion reporter and correspondent John Tucker as well. Where are we?
Can I resign that?
No.
Since
lifetime.
It's no longer an issue.
Well, the Pulitzer you got for it was great. John, where are we? I mean, we're all distracted by the heat. There's basically a lot less traffic in the city, just as a general statement, because of summer and that. But what's the next step here? Is it like people not employed, layoffs? What's the next step that you see?
No, I would say the projects that are scheduled by the MTA, they're kind of on hold, including the extension of the First Avenue subway.
Second Avenue,
on the east side of Manhattan, which is sorely needed, but the projects are on hold. The updates are on hold. But at this point, Governor Hochul, legislators in the MTA are going to have to come up with another way to charge you to make up for that.
Do you have a timeline, like Labor Day?
I don't. No, I don't. But I would guess that it's going to be something along the lines of a business tax.
Really?
Yes, that's my guess.
That would be your guess. John Tucker there, our surveillance congestion correspondent here. The highlight, Lisa, today was Paul Sweeney, a photograph on his Vespa, and I can report that it was flip-flops without socks.
Yeah,
exactly.
No socks.
How many safety regulations you violated with that?
Right there. Exactly. That's
we
how
had
we roll.
songs from France. We had a song on the politics of America. How about a song on United Kingdom, looking up to Manchester and Birmingham?
square, past the bridge, past the mills, past the stacks. On a gathering storm comes a tall, handsome man in a dusty black coat with a red ride.